Wing It Wednesday, but we should try to rename it Wing It Tuesday or something, and we'll just throw it out there, see if it sticks to the wall, and who knows?
Yeah,
Maybe
we gotta,
we'll learn how to talk.
that's usually what we do every Tuesday anyway, apparently, is talk about a lot of nothing. Oh, let me get my little low-key music, jazz music off. Okay, there we go. So.
Oh, you was getting me all ginned up. I mean, there's band music and all. Usually I got to go above the cloud line to, get myself, kind
of
in that place.
Yeah, get us in our little zone so we can sit on here and share our bias as well as talk about things that are going on. It's been kind of an interesting week for me.
And not to forget, how dare us to forget the lies and innuendo. We can never leave out, all of our
lies and innuendo. We're cockroaches and cohorts. It just goes on and on. But it's funny. Most of the people that say that are these, friendly politicians we have that don't necessarily appreciate the stuff that we point out sometimes.
Oh, I think they appreciate it. I think they just don't like it.
Oh, you know what? I didn't even check to see if anybody's watching. Okay, we're up to about 22 people. Let's see. Let's do the usual. I usually lead off with that we have to check. I got my YouTube notification. I guess we're on Facebook. I hadn't even checked.
I haven't either. I did get a Twitter notification. So if those of you or somebody, if anybody is out there watching on Facebook, hey, tell us if you're seeing us. I mean,
yes,
that's important.
Well, we do have Larry James Hawkins says howdy y'all. So we know we have at least one person from Facebook that can hear us. That's always a positive sign.
I am happy to see that, our audience is slowly building on the other platforms away from Facebook. That way they can't control as much. I mean, it's kind of like you give all the lawyers control and, it'll go too far to one side. Or if you give all the insurance people too much control, it goes too far to one side. And, maybe it needs to be kind of split down the middle a little bit.
Yeah, maybe so. Those pesky lawyers, I just can't hardly stand those suckers. I can't imagine us ever actually having a lawyer on the show, but,
Never.
Now joining us, one of the people.
Hey, I gotta do this. I don't know how to do it. Let me share screen. Did you see Maria Bartiromo this past Sunday?
No, I did not, but let me see if through the magic of clicking the correct buttons, I can share your screen. Okay, we're sharing your screen. It's going to probably be pretty loud, but go ahead.
Well, I'm looking at my screen and all I see is Maria Bartiromo. There's a whole lot more to the screen.
Oh, well, hold on a second. Let me see if I can stretch that deal out.
There we go.
Is that better?
We go.
Okay.
Okay. So you remember last week we were talking about Walk on Water.
Yes.
And remember about how, his support of the continuing resolution and, spending more money. I mean, we're only $33 trillion in debt, the most ever. And we're on track to spend, $2 trillion more a year. And hey, just business as usual. We'll just keep on shucking money. Who cares if our border's unsecure and we've got, this whole country's invading us, but by gosh, Ukraine, we got to send them.
Well, we have to keep the printing presses for the money in business and the ink companies and, the special paper they use or whatever. We got to keep those guys in business.
Right. And remember we were talking about how Matt Gaetz was the only guy that's kind of standing up to the craziness. Well, he went on Maria Bartiromo, and you got to watch this. I think this might be the single best interview of a politician that and him just going back at it I think I've ever seen. Watch this for a second.
All right.
Now joining us, one of the people holding up an agreement to fund the government, Florida Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz. Congressman, thank you very much for being here this morning.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad I get to respond to your monologue, because if you're saying that I'm standing in the way of all the Republican wins, I'd love you to enumerate them. watching my friend and mentor Jim Jordan, it was quite painful because he started by saying we should only pick one fight, the border. But then as the interview went on, he said, well, we should pick a second fight, Jack Smith. And by the time the interview rounded out, he was saying that we shouldn't be funding Ukraine without a plan. And yet the very continuing resolution that you and Jim Jordan seem to be for continues to have $300 million more for Ukraine. So I think we ought to fight on all fronts. I think the border is very important. And the best way for us to advance the Republican border policies is to pass the Department of Homeland Security appropriations bill, do that along with veterans, defense, ag, state and foreign ops. We'll have 73% of the discretionary budget funded. And if, the Department of Labor and Education have to shut down for a few days as we get their appropriations in line, that's certainly not something that is optimal, but I think it's better than continuing on the current path we are to America's financial ruin.
Congressman, I understand, and that is why you are on this program this morning, because I want to give you a fair shot, and I want to get you heard. So tell me why you are threatening Speaker McCarthy and trying to shut down this government at a time that the Republicans have finally gotten some upper hands here in terms of wins, able to investigate President Biden on what looks like bribery.
Yeah, we don't put our pencils down in the investigation of President Biden during a shutdown, so the premise is false. Second, if Kevin McCarthy was actually serious about pursuing the Bidens, he would have sent Hunter Biden a subpoena by now. That's how you know this is sort of failure theater that you're observing. During the first year of Democrat control of the Congress, they brought in Donald Trump Jr. 3 times over nothing. Over a nothing burger. And so we seem to be fundamentally unserious in our oversight. But what is serious is the fact that we are spending more than $7 trillion a year, bringing in around $5 trillion a year. And I want to fund the government. I'm not pro shutdown, but the way to fund the government is not the same way we've been doing it since the mid 90s, where it's one up or down vote on the entire government all at once. We should have separate single subject spending bills. Kevin McCarthy promised that in January. He is in breach of that promise. So I'm not here to hold the government hostage. I'm here to hold Kevin McCarthy to his word.
Are there Freedom Caucus members also out of compliance? They were also on the Appropriations Committee. Where is the responsibility for them? Are they also out of compliance?
No, I'm not a member of the Freedom Caucus. I'll let them speak for themselves. But take, for example, the border. This issue you think has great primacy, and I would agree with you. The Department of Homeland Security appropriations bill was passed out of the Appropriations Committee in June, and yet Kevin McCarthy hasn't put it on the floor in more than 100 days. That is not serious. You know why Kevin McCarthy didn't move our border appropriations bill? Because the lobbyists and the special interests who own Kevin McCarthy want to put us in this position where we're backed up against the wall, facing shutdown politics. And what that does is it centralizes power to the people that they buy off with PAC donations and lobbyist donations. And then the membership doesn't get to make real contributions to that process. I'm trying to democratize it.
The bills are being worked on. You just heard Jim Jordan say that they are efforting 4 bills this week,
right,
appropriations bills this week to get through.
What is the point? I mean, seriously, with the government shutdown, we've heard that ad nauseum. The truth is they don't actually shut the government down. They only shut parts of it down. I would argue they need to shut it down for a while and let everybody go home and then put new people in it. But that's a whole.
Let me ask you a question. It's election season right now, right?
Right.
And what are politicians telling you? What are they telling everybody?
Well, I mean, it depends on which side of the aisle and which politicians you listen to. Some of them are telling us we need to send quadrillions of dollars to Ukraine.
Well, no, we're endlessly hearing, that we need to bring home the bacon. We need more people to bring home more money. Well, I mean, we need a better process, or and they're making it's all these promises of what we're going to do and what we're going to get and whatever. And here you got in DC, you've got one guy, Congressman Gaetz, that's saying, hey, you know what? I'm going to hang my hat on if it shuts the government down. So what? I'm going to hold us to the promises that we made to the American people. And we're in debt. We're going the wrong direction. We're continuing to add more debt on it. And we said when we got control that we were going to do something different. We weren't going to do this. But yet here we are. We're doing it again. And somebody finally is stepping to the plate and saying no. And guess what? What was our congressman Walk on Water? Wasn't he one of those guys when he ran for office? Didn't he say he was going to go up there and be a limited government conservative guy and try to stop the wasteful spending and all of that? Wasn't he one of those guys?
Yeah, but he's like every other politician. He's full of hot air and BS.
Was that okay?
Well, I hate to say it. I hate to be the pessimist for the evening right now. Maybe after we go to the countdown, I'll come back and I'll be less pessimistic. But I got to say, that's pretty much the normal deal for these days. I don't believe any of them.
Well, it is. But if we're just going to continue to keep doing the same thing over and over again, we need to turn this show off right now and just stop. And that is the point, and that's why we've got one of our guests on tonight. And I think he's going to speak to it. Matt Gaetz is talking about that you and I, all the voters, as much as we would like to think that it's about us and that we're in control, the truth of the matter is we're not at all. It's special interest. It's lobbyists. We have no
It's
control.
Ukraine. Look, I'll give them at least a little bit of credit. They're not worried about bringing the bacon home. They're worried about sending the bacon to Ukraine.
So just like in Bossier City, rather than, try to get to the bottom of whether they had a secret meeting or not, they're all hell-bent on finding who busted them. That's the important thing in Bossier City. Same thing here. Matt Gaetz, guess what? They're rolling out attacks, soliciting, and it from what I'm understanding, it's coming from the Republican Party, going after Matt Gaetz. Why? Because he's standing up for what the people want.
Well, all right, let's discuss this some more on the other side of the break. We'll go ahead and do our countdown and get our intro out of the way. We're at about 11 minutes. We got about 60 people on Facebook. That means probably 70 or 75 when you add in, well, actually maybe more than that. When you add in YouTube and Facebook, this will give us a chance to share the show out and ask everybody else to tag folks and share it out. And we will introduce our guest shortly thereafter. How about that, Mr. Lowry? All right, here we go, folks. Countdown and ads. We will be back in about 3 minutes.
If folks knew a lot of the back office on the politicians that they think walk on water, they would be shocked. There's an old wound from a knife in my back that just is giving me heck lately, and it's just really irritating, so I have to kind of wiggle around a little bit.
Well, I've not heard my name in stable or Baton Rouge in stable in the same sentence in a long time.
And I titled it A Shot Across the Bow of the Good Old Boys.
Just, they feel helpless, they don't feel heard, they have nowhere to turn.
Some Republicans as well believe that government has the answers. And let me tell y'all something. I don't know anything government does well. Nothing.
And aren't there laws that say that you have public meetings so that the public can have accountability of their elected officials?
They're making a little bit of progress, but I would definitely have to give the race to Caddo Parish right now.
I don't know. Is there anybody from Plain Dealing watching, you think?
As a member of the media, I'm very concerned about what I've just heard.
Did you or did you not requisition some money to fight against this or for it?
We hired a lobbyist. It cost us $15,000. We were opposed to HB 630.
So for this week, folks, the cockroach of the week, according to Bossier Watch and Duke Lowry and Rex Moncrief, is
Raymond Croon's legislative assistant, Allie Feaster Smith. Thank you, Allie. Well, I'm not thinking Star Wars at all. I'm thinking zombie apocalypse. No way. It was not David. You know it wasn't David Montgomery. David ain't going to jump off in there with Chris. He ain't going to do it. He'd as soon spit on him as he would even look at him. Man, this is a Mickey D's Krispy Kreme week. Didn't you know? Who's paying y'all? And if you're driving on the roads, are you safe?
It's on the road, yeah.
Well, I know you're on the road, but I mean, is this all folks coming from the border down there?
Yeah, it's going to border. It's actually going to Mexico, the buses.
doesn't mean they interpret it the same way that I do. For instance, the Second Amendment. I take it very literally. That's been interpreted different ways in the court system all the way up to SCOTUS. Yeah, that's only going to cause more division that he claims he doesn't want to cause. And it's only going to cause more suspicion. We're still right now combined on both pages and YouTube at 264 people watching. That is amazing, folks. Coleman Project, the Walker Place deal, through conscious, shocking actions. The purpose of their actions was to stop plaintiffs, being the Earl Coleman and associated groups and all that, from developing Walker Place. But here's the key thing, which in turn would enrich sitting city council members Scott Irwin and David Montgomery Jr.
You hit the button? Does that mean that people are seeing us sitting here talking and chatting?
In theory, it's an every week thing. We got to double check and make sure it's like a miracle any of this actually works. This Bossier Watch live broadcast is brought to you by the Outdoor News, fishing and outdoors for our area. Acadiana Mortgage, over 25 years in the mortgage business. Pelican Training and Consulting. Reach out to Julie Ferris. Transact Card. Unleash the power of your spending with Z-Bucks. Contact Renee Hall. Smarter Geek. Making technology easier. And the many supporters, donations, and folks sharing information and watching out for Bossier. Now, grab your popcorn and a drink. Here we go. Did you grab your popcorn and your drink, Mr. Lowry?
No popcorn, but, got me a good hot cup of coffee, as usual, ready to go.
Yeah, I've got my trusty glass of iced tea here. So, anyway. So, look, I appreciate what Matt Gaetz was saying and all that, and, pretty much agree with him. It's just, it seems like everybody has the same spill. You can turn the news off and not watch the national news for a while, and then wait a week or two, turn it back on. It's like it picks up right where it left off.
Okay, now I've got to challenge my good friend Ed Burchett in the comments. Ed Burchett says, you don't stop Russia now, it'll be 1939 all over again. Well, Ed, my question to you is how is the U.S.-China war and the all the Chinese dissidents that are coming in across the border down there, how's that going to be when they start blowing up all of our infrastructure? I mean,
right.
How's this war going to work out? I mean,
I'm more worried about the Chinese and their encroachment in the Pacific and all that, and their possible takeover of Taiwan, which there goes our chip business and life as we know it, more so than I am Ukraine, and giving them billions of dollars.
We're not going to be able to worry about, at that point, Ukraine, and we're not going to be able to worry about South Korea, because you know what? We're going to have no idea what's going on over there, because all these Chinese that are coming across our Mexican border are going to be blowing all of our crap up here. We're going to be lucky to be able to go get a thing of popcorn at Brookshire's, because our whole infrastructure is going to be screwed up. And we're a bunch of idiots because we're sitting here, we know it's happening, and we're not doing anything about it. And why? Because we're worried about Russia over there in Ukraine.
So you're saying that tonight on Bossier Watch, we can't solve the world's problems and world peace, at least not tonight.
Well, we can't stop building up $1 trillion of debt. We're at 33 trillion.
That's ongoing. You may as well give up on that. I say we tell China and Russia and whoever else has bought up our debt, screw y'all. We're not paying you.
So let me get this straight. I'm supposed to believe that we can't solve our spending problems here at home. We can't solve our border problems, but yet we're going to solve the problem with Ukraine and Russia?
No, we're not. Here's the deal. If Trump was our last hope, really, who else is going to do it? Look, I like Ron DeSantis. Do I think Ron DeSantis is going to solve any of this? No, he's not going to solve it any more than Trump was able to. That's it. I voted for Trump. I was just having this discussion with one of my boys, but I voted for Trump primarily for his judicial picks. That's it. And SCOTUS picks. I didn't vote for him. I didn't vote for him because I thought he was going to drain the swamp. I mean, it was fun to say during the campaign for rhetoric, but there's no doing that. All right. Anyway, I digress. Let's bring it back to bossierwatch instead of Washington watch. We can't do anything about those jackwagons, to borrow your term, in Washington.
Ed, did you watch the intro of the show? I literally made the intro, Rex, right there.
Wait a minute. Hold on, not to interrupt you. So he says, I'll need statistics on Chinese invaders. Until then, it's another 2,000 mules. Well, Ed, I need the statistics on the Russian invaders that are invading us right now. Are they invading our country? I don't see the jets flying overhead. They're not scrambling Barksdale. Where are they? This is not Red Dawn yet. All right, anyway, I digress again. But thanks for commenting, Ed. I'm sorry.
I don't know what to say.
I'll get off. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'll get off my soapbox for a few minutes. All right, let's move on and move back. I'm trying to circle us back to
something tells me this is going to be one of those nights where we are going to be all over the place.
Yeah. Well, our guest, who it's going to be his first time on, he might not want to come back ever.
Maybe not. We'll see. But anyway, so hey, we had and people may be wondering what guest exactly we're talking about. Now, we did a show intro and we announced that we were going to be having a couple of guests on. Isn't that right?
Yes, and something happened. You want to explain that? Explain yourself, Mr. Lowry, or explain what happened?
Well, what I will say is I'll say that I think there is a pattern developing. And
yes.
I think there is a pattern developing. But so, last week before last show, we get all kinds of folks that reach out to us and try to share information. Right. And I got to get centered up here in the trees here a little bit. I'm off to one side here. You should have told me. Focus a little bit.
I have to chase you around with the camera anyway. So it's
fun. See,
it's like hunting, only we're not hunting.
There you go. Well, anyway, so people reach out to us and they tell us stuff. They tell us things that are going on and things are getting mad about government and things. And we had someone, and you posted their name that they would be a guest coming on the show. And so before the last show, I tried to get them to come on that night, and they were like, look, there's no way I can do it now, but I will do it the next show. And they were going to come on and they were going to tell the story that they were telling, me about the problem that they were having. The problem that they were having was regarding a road and what services they were getting out of the police jury, their dissatisfaction, communications that they had with their police juror, and the excuse, I will say, up to that point of why they couldn't get anything done. And it'll go to the point they were told that the police jury ran out of gumbo pack money for them to be able to fix this problem. And this problem was they were blacktopping part of the road and they were stopping right up to the Cypress District Park and not going any further than that.
Wait. Pause right there. So did you just say they ran out of gumbo pack money?
Yeah, that's what I was told.
Okay, so continue on.
So I said, okay, well, I said that sounds possible, and I can understand that you're aggravated, and I understand that, you want to tell the story. I said, well, look, why don't you come on the show and you can tell the story yourself, real person. And they agreed, and we set in motion a plan. She was going to come on tonight. So the plan was first thing this morning, we was going to touch base again and just, the timeline of when to check in. We would do a mic check and video check like we always do with guests.
Right.
But even before I could touch base, I got a message from this person. And if you'll go to cut 1, you'll see the response that I got.
So give me just a second here. Let's see. Hold on just a second. Screenshots. I gotta do this and click a couple of buttons and cut 1 and bam. All right. Sorry, it took me a few minutes.
That's okay. So they let me know bright and early this morning. They said, Philip Rogers reached out to me last Thursday morning, and I was able to discuss my issues and concerns with him. He ended up calling me back that afternoon and was able to borrow funds from another police juror to complete paving all the way to the end of Linton Road. it will be finished by this afternoon. Same
Imagine
day,
that.
today.
Imagine that. I wonder why that could be.
Well, I astutely replied, isn't that amazing during an election year?
Yeah, and so to finish up what they said, I have to give him credit on this one. We had a 45-minute discussion on the road and internet. By the end of the day, he had a solution for the road.
Now, look at how fast, when it's election time, that politicians can get things done.
Well, look, I got to say, we've had 2 other instances, and I can't really say much about them yet, except there is video that has been running, and apparently that video has helped some people make some progress with the Bossier Parish Police Jury. But I'm not going to say much more than there's a little bit of controversy going on, and we may have some very interesting things to share in the next few weeks about the police jury and some particular candidates. Maybe not. We'll have to see.
Well, it seems like to me, Rex, that if people out there are having problems getting things done with the police jury, right now, before the first vote is cast, is the time to cash in your chips, because those police jurors, for some reason, sure are motivated to address problems right now. In fact, I'm thinking there's a big lawsuit down there on the river, that is going to roll into court on Thursday regarding Henry Cantrell's place down there and that whole big deal. I don't know. I'm thinking Henry might ought to be making some phone calls saying, hey, you working deals out with everybody else. Why not me? Come on.
Yeah. Well, and so I've been thinking about this. Robin Hood has been stuck in my head all afternoon. Now, I haven't read any of the tales of Robin Hood since I was a kid, but it's almost like we're able to, quote unquote, rob from the rich men north of Bossier or I-20 or, well, whatever we want to say to allude to that song, and give back to all us poor voters and constituents. We're robbing away from the things that the police jury and the city council is doing that typically they don't get any notice on or nobody pays attention to. And we're able to bring these things up to the attention of the average poor folks out here.
Now I'm just wondering here, if you're Robin Hood, what am I? Am I the friar?
Well, I was going to say, you're definitely not Little John because he was a big old guy. You can be Will Scarlet, or you can be Robin Hood and I'll be Will Scarlet. See, I remember a couple of the characters, but that's about it.
I guess I'll have to be the friar. Okay.
You can be Friar Tuck.
I'll be
Friar Duke. See, it even sounds good. Friar Duke. All right.
Well, hey, I think all of the miracles of election season are not done with yet. I think there's going to be quite a few more miracles that we're going to be able to report on in the next coming weeks. So
wait, are you saying by some miracle Ryan Gatti might actually be on the ballot?
We've been suing for, well, see, I said sue. I mean,
that's lawyer speak.
We've been trying to make this happen for how long now? Ever since we started this show.
Well, for a pretty good while. And oh, look, there he is, finally on the show. Can you hear us, Ryan?
I can hear you.
Good, and we can hear you. That's always a good thing. So
I didn't actually have to sue him, y'all, to get him to come on.
No. You just sent me a nice invitation.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, we've joked about it. We've invited you on multiple times, and for one reason or another, you hadn't been able to do it. But we're glad to have you on tonight. I don't know if you know this, but you were kind of an inspiration for Bossier Watch.
So y'all need another avenue to talk bad about me?
Exactly correct.
Okay.
On the record, this is live, no takebacks. So,
I know. I'm joking. I appreciate that. I think y'all have inspired a lot of people to kind of get out of their comfort zone and dig deep. And, the work that y'all have done has been important work. I don't, some of the stuff I agree with, some I don't, but I've told y'all that. But, it's important work. Freedom of speech is a big deal. Without it, we don't have any other freedom. And even you and Duke disagree on some issues. And I think it's important to have a venue that's, where folks can comment and they can, iron can sharpen iron. And when iron sharpens iron, sparks fly. That's part of democracy.
Good point. So I have no idea where this conversation is going to go this evening. We got some basic notes, but not much. So we'll just start picking some topics and we'll just see where it leads.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
go ahead.
I just wanted to say to everybody watching, I mean, look, Ryan came on. He agreed to come on. We've set no parameters. There's no notes. There's no topics. I mean, and Ryan said, "Hey, you know what? Any subject, let's talk about it. Let's put it all out there. Let's talk about everything." So, Ryan, just to start right off, I'm going to say hat tip to you. Let's get in it. And, hopefully at the end of this, we'll still be friends. You'll be willing to go on the show. But you're right. Iron does sharpen iron. I mean, you've said that for years.
And it's a big deal. And, like I said, we've all been through tough things in our life where people have kind of exaggerated how good we were or talked about us worse than we really are. And that's why these dialogues are important, share ideas and look, my life's an open book, and so, I'm here just to help the process along. And every Tuesday, whether I'm bush hogging or on a vacation, I get a text from somebody saying, "Hey, they're talking about you again." And I'm like, "Uh-oh, I better turn it on." So
well, it's usually not too bad. I'm sure your ears aren't burning too much,
Well, not yet, but they'll probably catch on fire here in about 5 minutes.
Yeah, well, we'll see. So, all right, Duke, you want to lead off? I can lead off. Ryan, you want to lead off? How do we want to handle this?
Ryan. Okay, here's how we'll really just get off on it. Let's just government in general. Okay, one time you and I were a party to a conversation with some other folks, and we were talking about politics in Bossier and Bossier and Webster, and you were making the case, and you were saying, no, it's purple. It's not red. Me and one person to the part of the conversation were making and contending that it was red, meaning Republican. You were contending, no, it's purple. Tell me what you were meaning by that.
Well, it wasn't a reference to Barney or anything. I mean, what I was concerned about is that, I was vice chair of the Republican Party of Bossier. I've always wanted to be involved. Grew up in Bossier, and all of us that have grown up in Bossier have seen a lot of changes. And so when I ran for office, I really thought like everyone who's out there saying, "Man, I want no taxation and I want this," and then I started getting emails once I won. And one of the emails that I got that really kind of put this purple thing in action was I had somebody, and I'm a state senator. They wanted me to make sure that I didn't vote for Obama's deal to pay off all student loans and to give kids college for free. And the first paragraph, that's what it was about. The second paragraph said, "Please make sure you vote for my grandkids' TOPS money." And so it really hit me that this person did not understand that TOPS is a handout that really hits us worse than a federal loan or grant program, because the Taylor Opportunity Program started with a $20 million pledge from Mr. Taylor, and he never brought it to the table. And that has grown into a $250, $300 million giveaway. And so, and then as I would knock doors, you would find that folks, we really had a broader socioeconomic situation going on in Bossier than most people realize, because everybody kind of stays in their neighborhood. We stay in our lane. But as you walk down around Maggio's store, you walk over in Webster Parish, you start to see there's still a lot of people, and race has nothing to do with it. They're just outside of the prosperity that a lot of us have been able to enjoy. And when you represent 4 parishes with a broad spectrum, and that's why I told you, said, look, this area is not red, it's not blue, it's purple, because we have Democrats that are pro-life and pro-gun, and we have Republicans that want handouts. And it's a very inconsistent request, from folks, because I think that the party system, in a way, and Gaetz kind of said this in your intro, is like the party system is failing, because they're picking and choosing which items they're going to push, and then they kind of lie to us about everything else. So, it's one of those things where I got to experience that immediately, but I didn't mean any disparaging remark about us being purple. I just said, look, if you realize we're not red and blue, that most families are purple. We rely on the government for some stuff, but we want small government. We really don't fit into the pigeonhole of red or blue. And that allowed me to really kind of open my mind up and do a lot of good stuff for our area. And I kind of knew I wasn't going to get reelected. I kind of knew about 2018 when I shut down the abortion clinic that people that conservative people were not happy about that, because that's their issue. So that's kind of what I meant by that.
Yeah, so that's interesting, Duke. Instead of having the maroon background, I should have made it a purple background. I'll play comic relief tonight. So, anyway.
Well, and I did not know, about the Taylor grant, the money that was supposed to come, and that's how it originated, and it never came to fruition. And now I think all of our legislators, I would contend, are hogtied by this mandate that the public, they will say that they're limited government conservative and they want to do something about debt and spending, but yet, oh, by the way, hey, I want to hang on to this little benefit here, not realizing that there's a consequence for that. It may be that, that bridge in your district may not get, done, that road or what have you. There's a cause and effect on everything.
We have a huge, just in the microcosm of TOPS. When I would tell folks, hey, can we raise the ACT score? Could we make it needs-based? And the Democrats in my district didn't get mad about that because they have other alternatives, Pell Grants, low-cost loans, scholarships, right? The folks that really got upset with me about that were my friends that live in nice big houses, And I said, guys, if we're going to be small government conservatives, then that means we can't ask for handouts. And so it was a unique thing. And that's part of why my kids are one's in Nashville and one's in Fort Worth, because, I kind of saw that you can't keep lying to yourself in a democracy, about where you're heading or what your real values are. You can't say one thing and do another thing for too long. And I think that's why you see Nashville growing, because they're true to themselves. You see Tyler, Texas growing. They're bringing in manufacturing, and we're trying to figure out if we're going to let the Sport Trend bus go to South Bossier. You know what I'm getting at? This is some crazy stuff.
How did you, and Rex, so you can get in here. I'm sorry, I'm
Go ahead.
Just real quick, Ron, how did you vote on all the TOPS votes?
Well, some of them I think I voted against. Some I did amendments. But the hardest thing about being a representative is that, especially in a purple district, is I don't vote for what I want, right? I knocked on doors. I read the socio-demographics. You have to kind of, and maybe I learned this at the judicial college when I was a judge, but you have to set aside, what's good for you. And you have to say, okay, the Claiborne doesn't have a Walmart. Bienville Parish is struggling. And so sometimes I would say, look, my kids aren't ever going to use TOPS. I pay a lot of taxes, but the majority of our kids moving from poverty to prosperity, they need this. So it was a tough vote. So it was a lot of all these votes were hard during the deficit year. All of them were. So if I could go back, there's some votes I would change. And now that I know more about how lobbyists work and all that, and the pressure they put on you and the lies they tell you, I would go back and change, at least 20 or 30 votes that I could go back and do.
Well, okay. So that brings up an interesting point. What are some of the votes that, now that you're not a state senator anymore, you're, Ryan Gatti goes down and, goes to the ballot box and votes. But if you could go back and change any votes that you personally felt for or against, but as a senator, you voted the other way, have you got any of those in mind?
He's not talking about Mike Johnson, so go ahead.
We'll get to that in a minute.
There's a few that come to mind that still I kind of wake up in the middle of the night and think about. I got a call from a constituent who said, hey, man, the guy that killed my grandmother is up for parole because of something you voted on. And I'll never forget it. I was at TCU taking Catherine for her first visit, and I almost started crying. I'm like, oh, my God, did I not read because I read every bill, every line, asked lawyers about it. I'll never forget. I said, tell me exactly. And he met with me. We talked about it. I said, I apologize profusely. And that was like in October, November. And so I pre-filed a bill to undo that part of the Justice Reform Act. And at that point, we learned that the associations that I trusted for criminal justice input, because I probably do 20 or 30 criminal cases a year. I'm not a criminal, that's not my wheelhouse. So I would rely on those people that was their subject matter expertise. And we found out that pretty quick in 2016 they were lying to us, that Lobby wanted to empty the jails to reduce the cost of the correction system so that they could maintain their tax exemptions for their big corporations, and they could say, hey, look, we're balancing the budget. And once I realized that it wasn't just a criminal justice reform issue, that it was actually a let's make the line item of Department of Corrections smaller by letting people out, then a lot of folks didn't get reelected over that, and I'm one of them. And we spent the next 24 months just pulling the threads of that. And I was happy to say that my bill that made it that excluded first degree murderers from any parole, that if life means life, we were able to get that bill passed. And everyone that voted for my bill did not know it was included in the Justice Reform Act. And even my reading of the Justice Reform Act, I didn't think it was included, but it was being interpreted by the bureaucracy as something that was a lesser included of the bill. So that one I wish I could have back. That was a tough one.
Well, now look. All right, so we're gonna get to this point. You're friends with John Bell. You'll have a relationship. I mean, he was big on this. I mean, this was a big thing of his. So what you're saying is that if Lobby was advocating for it, Lobby was not big John Bell Edwards people, or maybe they were. I mean, who knows about? But I'm just saying, how can he be? How could he have made this mistake? And
that is a great question, and I was trying to figure out a way to articulate that part. Here's what I found out. I was kind of playing checkers for 12 months, and they were all playing chess. And that's why seniority is kind of important, because when Lobby sends you a card to vote for it, and then the Democrats are for it, and the associations of whatever police departments are for it. I learned after that to read through the lines, in between the lines, and say, look, if I got a question, I'm voting no. And sometimes I'd be the only red vote after, because what happened is this: they weren't going to vote for the expenditures to balance the budget, right? Lobby's trying to hold on to about $9 billion in bailouts to the top. That's who they represent. And they're open about that. That gives money to their PACs, and they feed those PACs down, that PAC money down to people who kind of sell out for them. Of course, I didn't. And then, so if you take an issue like that, and it takes a while to find it, where a Democrat is typically for letting criminals out of jail because they're just really good people. You just got to give them a second chance. And that's wrong. But I kind of trusted Lobby and the conservative groups, but then I found out they're not really Louisiana Association of Business and Industry. I mean, they're Louisiana Association of Big Industry and Insurance, so we got crossways pretty quick. And I think my first semester down there, I asked one of the senators that sat by me, a Republican, I said, what do you think Lobby gave me? He goes, man, you probably got 102, Gatti, you're most Christian conservative guy I know. I said, man, I got a 22%. They said, me and you voted the same way, and I got 100. So what Matt Gaetz was saying about the lobbyist hold, I probably raised $100,000 in my campaign. I spent a lot of my own money. Man, they can stroke checks for $500,000. Tie up Moon Griffon for 3 months, tie up Kill Radio, put 1,000 mailers in people's mail. So, I think what was unique, though, about the Justice Reform Act is that the Democrats supported it for two reasons. It let people out early, Okay. It made it tougher for DAs to prosecute real crimes for real victims. And the Republicans held their nose and voted for it because lobby told them to. You know, I mean, you look back, there was not any strong opposition. In fact, I kept they give you a little slip to tell you how to vote. The lobbyists do, and the ushers, the sergeant arms pass it out, and I kept every slip that I ever got in 4 years. And it's like just stacks of them. And I'm going to go back and find that one because it was kind of a hidden thing. It's not a public record or anything. It's just a little note they send you. But I think with that, what kind of coalesced was you had the Democrats want and lobbies want. Lobbies want was financial. They get paid a lot of money as lobbyists to protect the bailouts to the top. I mean, $9 billion is like 3 times the income tax. You know, I mean, it's a huge number. I mean, you can't balance a budget giving bailouts to the top and handouts to the bottom. There's no way you can raise enough money in the middle class and the entrepreneurs to make this work. And every time I talk about fair flat taxes, I had a bill to change the homestead exemption to slide it up to where everybody paid on the first 25 grand. And of course, that was a no-no. And on the other end, I wanted to say, look, you only get bailouts if you create jobs. And that's why Robert Mills ran against me, because Calumet was getting huge tax exemptions, right? And not creating jobs for those exemptions. And Sheriff Prater called him out on it. And I stood up and said something, and that cost me my second 4-year sentence in the Senate.
Well, that brings up a whole lot of interesting points in that discussion. I'd like to remind everybody that Lobby is the group that also advocated in the beginning for Common Core and helped push Common Core.
Really?
Yes. I found that out while doing research during the Gatti versus Mills race.
Yeah.
All right. So a lot of the politicians, and mostly on the right, the Republican side in the state, always tout their lobby score. And, it's a big deal. You see it on all the push cards and the mailers and all that, lobby score. So your contention is that lobby is not really all it's cracked up to be as far as conservatism. Is that kind of what I'm hearing you say?
I think back, like when I worked in the Senate and law school, they were a respected group of small business and mid-sized businessmen and manufacturers. When Jindal saw the writing on the wall that he was not going to get reelected and he wasn't going to be president of the United States, his people his supporters got his people to kind of spread out into Loga, Lamoga, Lobby, and Stephen Wagasback, who was Jindal's chief executive for I think 8 years, kind of orchestrated all the deficits. He then moved over to Lobby, and it was the first time a lobbyist ran Lobby. And I'm not involved in all that. I just, we were trying to figure out, like, man, when I used to work here in the 90s, Lobby was a respected name. The membership had a voice, and sometimes Lobby would tell me to do stuff, and I'd call some manufacturers in my area, and they said, Ryan, we're not for that. Like that. Don't do tort reform unless it's going to lower our insurance. Don't do this stuff unless it's going to make a difference in our bottom line. And so I would just stand strong and, say, hey guys, look, I can't be with you. But now the lobby scores are padded. And if you really dissect them like I did, most of the votes they score you high on really don't help out our area at all. And so I was happy that they gave me Emmett Smith's number my first year. It allowed me to have a lot of respect with my colleagues, and they saw that I was not going to cower down or bow down, and they knew that I wasn't going to get reelected. And man, I made some of the deepest friendships with men and women from around the state because they said, "Look, you're not." I said, "Look, I was in Haiti when I won. I don't know how I'm here, but while I'm here, I'm gonna keep doing what we need to do." And but yeah, the lobby scores are pat. I got a 98. I had 100 1 year. They rescored it to give me like a 92.
They gotta give you a little curve there. All right, so so there's multiple directions we could go now. Do we talk about the Senate election, or do we talk about insurance? Because we've kind of touched on both of them. Let's head to insurance first. Okay, so in 2019, you came to the Bossier Peck meeting and did a presentation on insurance. And correct me if I'm wrong, but your, main premise was controlling the insurance agencies, and I'll give you a chance to clarify that. And then a month later, of course, Alan Seaball came in, and Alan Seaball was like, oh no, we got to have all this other reform and all that. Now, here's the way all the common people see it, all those common folks out here, is we've got, on one hand, a trial billboard lawyer. I'll let you address that in a minute. And on the other hand, we got Alan Seaball, who is literally an insurance attorney.
Yeah.
So who do we believe? So address two things for me. One, what kind of attorney are you? Are you the billboard attorney like we see plastered all over town? And number two, what is it going to take to get the insurance costs down? Because it definitely has not gone down for most people since 2019.
Look, I grew up working at my dad's wrecking yard, and nobody in my family went to college successfully, right? And y'all know my family story. Just bad stuff happened. Everybody's got people in their family that struggle, and I was pulling off I'll never forget this. I was pulling off a brake drum off a '69 Camaro convertible for a guy. And I said, "What do you do for a living? You're out here in a suit on a Saturday." He goes, "Well, I practice law." I said, "Well, tell me about that." So as we walked back up to the front, it was Pete King. He started telling me all the cool stuff about being a lawyer, that he had been a policeman. I'm like, "Man, how long were you in school? Because I'm broke." And he said, "You get your undergrad degree, you get your law degree, and you can start making money." I thought, man, that's a great way, because and my teachers always told me at airline, they said, "You should practice law. You make straight A's, you football team captain." I'm like, "Look, I just want to go back out and work at the wrecking yard." And then they really inspired me to do that. Well, my last year of law school, I had a job lined out at the Second Circuit Court of Appeal. And we found out Susan was pregnant with our first child. And I was going to commute back and forth to Baton Rouge and Bossier, like stay here 4 days, go to Baton Rouge and be with her, because she was working on her PhD. When we found out we're having a baby, I'm like, man, I can't be away. So all the jobs were taken. I had to resign from that position before I even started. And I started a law firm out of my house, and I would just I had a mailboxes, etc. box. I had a laptop and a huge printer. I mean, they were massive. And people thought I was really cool because I'd go meet them at their house, And so that's kind of how I started. Now, fast forward 24 years, we've had a child that died of a brain injury, got 2 kids in college. What we do, when we moved back to Bossier in 2002, we just decided that Susan would work at the Health Science Center, and I would, with her PhD, and that I would continue just representing people that I knew. So we went from like 4 files to 5 files to like thousands of files, and it was really neat because we didn't have to change who we were. And if somebody came in and needed an adoption, we just did it. We learned how to do it. LSU teaches you how to do everything. If somebody needed to have the son represented, we did that in a criminal case. Divorce, we do that. Set up a business, we do that. And then in over 23 and a half years, we've been able to help a lot of people. And I think what I really enjoy doing, though, is because I watched Rebecca suffer through a doctor-inflicted birth injury for 10 years. God really prepared me, because she was a spastic quadriplegic for 10 years, and she passed away July 31st of 2017. And I think God was kind of preparing me to do brain injury cases, because my clients don't have to like translate to me what it's like to change a grown-up's diaper, or what a seizure looks like, or how to feed someone through a Mickey button, or, man, Ryan, we spent 6 months in Tier in New Orleans, or in Houston. So yeah, I'm proud to say that the folks who I've represented with brain injuries, they're like family to me. And I've done billboards to say like, hey, we moved our office or things like that. But I think the billboard lawyers have really destroyed the relational interest. It's like if Walmart moved into by Maggio's, it would destroy it. I'm getting at every time. So that's kind of the thing. So no, I'm not a billboard lawyer.
Well, Ryan, look, I have a different take. I have a different take, and I'm not saying that Rex was saying that all the fault is of the billboard lawyers or the problem. I'm not. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, and tell me I'm wrong, but isn't it? Wouldn't it be an accurate assessment from the layperson that basically all of the billboard lawyers and the insurance industry, the lobby per se, isn't it that they're all in cahoots and just working against
There is
all of us, the public?
there is no doubt they're in cahoots. Like I've been down there, Duke. I'm telling you, they all work together because whiplash cases from a TV attorney are worth $2,000 or $3,000, and insurance companies pay them 15. They're like, hey, let me just start with this. I was questioning, and I was in vice chair of Senate Insurance, and Jim Donlin was at the table, and I've been waiting for him to be at the table because he's under oath, right? And I said, he's the commissioner of insurance, and I said, hey, the bill you just spoke against would have reduced rates. Can you tell me how rates are set? And I'm paraphrasing. And he said, well, we allow insurance companies to charge 6 or 7 points above their last year expenses for premiums. And so I said, next question was, what do you consider a legitimate expense? And he looked very angry at me. And I said, how about marketing? I said, because I don't feel like I should reimburse them 7 points on top of the lizard telling me to buy Geico when I have to buy insurance. I have to buy this commodity. I cannot operate any of my trucks, any of my cars without buying this. So do you allow them to, they're $84 million in marketing? He said, oh, well, that's a legitimate expense. And that's where we went crossways. So what that unlocked was this equation that the more the insurance company spends on a claim, he's just going to approve it, and they're going to get 7 or 8 points on top of that. Now, I know it's a lot more complicated than that, but that was him under oath. And so we tried to chip away at the expenses that were allowable before the modifier came in. And man, that was I really was worried at that point because everybody in the room knew this before I asked that question, except for me. And so I'll give you another example that's very, very important. If you go back and look, I think it was a special session, and Jack McFarland, who is one of the most conservative members of the House, he's a former police jury, a timberman, very upset about high insurance rates. He called me and he goes, Gatti, I'm going to do a bill that limits billboards, not just for trial lawyers, but the billboard has to be within 6 miles of your actual office, like Notini's, Red River Chevrolet. So to make it constitutional, it had to be all businesses, right? Because Maine has a rule that passed constitutional muster that said you can't have billboards at all. Okay, and so I said, Jack, if you get that to the Senate, I will run it through for you because they have ruined my practice. It's bad. And so he got to his first committee and he said, come over here and watch. So I went over there and watched Lamar Advertising, who I respect. Everyone I knew who worked for Lamar Advertising, which is a member of lobby and the biggest family-owned corporation in the state, they showed up and lobbied each one of those members of the Transportation Committee. The bill died from Republican votes in that committee to end the billboard. And I think it sent shockwaves. You haven't seen anybody report on it. It didn't happen. And Jack and I, every time we visit, I remind him, remember that time you did the billboard bill and lobby killed it? He goes, yeah. So that's my proof. And, people can prove me wrong, but, I think that's why everywhere you go, there's billboards, because the business and industry appreciates the millions of dollars those lawyers spend because it creates something in the economy that's positive, which I disagree with.
All right, but here I'll give an easy example, and so this is firsthand. Now, this was back in 2004, 2005. I was living in East Texas, moved back to Bossier. Anyway, long story made short, I held on to my insurance as long as I legally could in Texas, which wasn't very long, because the premium was literally half. Same vehicle, same coverage. I have almost a perfect driving record, maybe a couple of speeding tickets in 30-something years or whatever. But anyway, insurance was twice as much in Louisiana. Now, I don't know if it's still that way. I'm sure Duke can probably chime in on that as much as anybody, but what causes the insurance to be so high in Louisiana? Give us a straight answer.
Well, so the high premiums in Louisiana are from lack of regulation. I want you to think about it this way: an NFL game with no umpires or referees. Okay, folks are going to get away with stuff. All right, but they have like 10, and they got guys in the booth watching every microsecond of every play to make sure these assets on the field do not get hurt. What I learned with House Bill 362 from 2019 was that they were not going to allow anything in that bill that would lower rates. And so I think what the listeners need to understand is, like, if you're going to build a house, you hire an architect, right? If I'm going to get a loan, I hire a mortgage company. If you're going to go to court, you hire a lawyer. If you're going to look at insurance, okay, you have to hire actuaries. And actuaries are math geniuses that can actually sit down and say, if you do this, this is how it will affect rates. And they're right. Okay? Because if they're wrong, nobody asks them ever again. And insurance is actually not that hard of a commodity to predict what it's going to do. Okay? So when we asked the actuaries if any of the things in House Bill 372 would lower rates, and I shared this at that PEC meeting, they all said none of these are going to, some of them are going to increase rates. And so I reported that in Judiciary A, and I was the only one that asked for the actuarial report from the study committee. And I talked about it, and finally got the author of a bill to admit under oath that the Omnibus Premium Reduction Act was not going to reduce premiums. So the reason premiums are high is because of what Matt Gaetz said. I'm so glad you played that, because, man, the lobbyists for the insurance companies are controlling probably, they put up 6 or 7 people in our area for the legislature right now. It is not a coincidence. And this is just my theory. Jeff Landry's probably going to win. He's made a promise to reduce premiums. And out of 10 or 12 legislators up here that our area gets to elect, probably 6 or 7 of them, 90 to 95% of their income is derived from the success of insurance companies. So our area is sending a message to Baton Rouge that we want our tops, and we want this to happen.
Is
right. Yeah, go ahead, Duke.
Well, I want to, Ryan, is insurance in Texas more affordable than in Louisiana?
There's no doubt.
Okay, Rex, share my screen, because Ryan, you mentioned the Omnibus Insurance Premium Act, and this has been in my folder for a long time, even all the way back to whenever. And I see what you're wanting to get at, Rex. But
that's okay.
We'll come back to that. So here is an email, that, and you may recall this, and it was in, you were running for re-election. I think John Bell Edwards was running to be the governor. And I think this is one of the PACs, or the gumbo PAC, or what have you. And in the very beginning of the letter, I mean, I'm not going to read the whole thing. If you want to read the whole thing for context, you probably know, but basically, here, and I'll read this one paragraph. Whether you represent plaintiffs or defendants, if the drastic tort reform efforts proposed by the opponents of Governor Edwards are enacted as law, the legal community will shrink dramatically, a fact that will impact all of us. If you do not believe me, call any attorney in Texas, or should I say, call an insurance agent or used car salesman in Texas who used to practice law. If that's the case in Texas, I mean, and you supported this pack. You sent a lot of money to it. If that's the case in Texas, that they have far better premiums than we do in Louisiana, I mean, this email is basically saying, you know what?
That's it. That's an email that Dodie Horton printed in the Bossier Press. That is an email from Kenny Hooks, who was my co-counsel in a class action against Chesapeake and Petrohawk for about 3,000 landowners in Keithville. Kenny and I, he's a lawyer in Baton Rouge, excellent lawyer. He is not with Gumbo Pack. Okay. He saw what was happening to me with all the mailers. And he said, Ryan, what can I do to help? I said, I'm going to lose. Don't do anything. I've done the polling. Donald Trump is coming next week to say I'm not a real Republican. I said, now John Bell's going to win by about 30 or 40,000 votes, but I'm not, and I'm okay with it.
Well, I'm not wanting to rehash all that. What I'm wanting to know is if I asked you if Texas's insurance is better than us. You said that it was, and this is obviously the lawyer community talking. I don't know all these people, and they're saying if you want to be like Texas, the point we're talking about is insurance and having reduced rates. They're saying that Texas has obviously done something regarding lawfare. I'll just say it that way in generality, and they have better insurance. So are they wrong?
So this is, I mean, Kenny's a great guy. He hasn't studied this like I have. I think he was listening to all the lobbyists on both sides. My daughter's in Fort Worth. She has the same car she had at Airline High School. She went from 71111 to TCU zip code. She's a Texas resident now. She's not coming back. And she said, Dad, my insurance dropped by 50%. Same coverage, really high coverage. So the Texas has very similar tort laws that we do. Very similar. And when you compare there's 3 or 4 things you could do to lower rates in Louisiana. They're not going to happen. Okay. Because the insurance industry does not want to lower rates. Okay. This email has really got a lot in it. I'd love to talk about. We could do a whole show on it. When you don't regulate what is a valid expense that an insurance company can carry over for that modifier, I was told by an insurance lobbyist at the table. He said, "I don't care what you and Senator Luno pass. We're going to find a way to raise rates." And that hit me and said, it really doesn't matter what we pass if the commissioner doesn't regulate them, right? And that's what has happened. They're making billions of dollars in Louisiana, and we just gave them $45 million out of our tax money. So yeah, what Texas got right in both the Haynesville Shale and in insurance is that their government regulatory committee does its job. Okay. And they don't care if they get a nasty gram from some lobbyist. So I think if we could take insurance to a rate setting commission rather than an elected insurance person, because the qualifications to run for insurance commissioner is you got to have made a lot of money selling insurance. So I think to answer the question, you got to cut the head off the snake, take the lawyers out of it, and set up a commission like every other state has.
Why should we not take the lawyers and the insurance out? Because I agree. I'm picking on you. I'm picking on you, and I pick on the lawyers all the time because I got to tell you, I have less faith in the legal system than I have in any other system that we have. I'm sorry that may offend you, but that's how I feel. But I have to tell you, second in that race is the insurance industry. They're right there. In my opinion, I think neither one of those two groups have the best interests of mind of the public at hand. Neither one of them.
I agree. I mean, I've always said that So the kind of cases that I do, severe traumatic brain injury cases or spine cases or people who are burned over all their body, none of these little laws matter. Okay? Because any jury would give them 50 or $100 million because it's terrible the pain they've been through. Okay. We do focus groups with all white Republican men, and they say, if that was my daughter, if that was my son, if I was on the jury, I'd give you $150 million. That's ridiculous what that company did. So the kind of work I do is not even, it doesn't even have to do with State Farm and those kind of people. You see what I'm getting at? So I objectively told the trial lawyers, I'm going to vote for House Bill 372 if I get a guaranteed 15 or 20% rate reduction. And so I kind of lost their support. You see, so
all right.
Anyway,
So
that's a good point.
I'm gonna switch screens back to this. If I remember correctly, this was a post from Seaball. I think after that 2019 PEC meeting with you 1 month and then Seaball the next month. I think that was it. But anyway, you can see right there, and I'll read it because it's probably kind of small. But in yellow, it says Seaball is saying the only people saying that it would not lower rates were the trial lawyers that did not want it to pass. The only special interest that John represents in Baton Rouge is his own law firm, if I can talk. Now, interestingly, right before that, the testimony from the insurance commissioner, right before the yellow highlight, and everyone else that testified regarding the impact of the bill was that it would absolutely, definitely lower insurance rates. Look, I'm asking the viewers, has anybody's insurance rates overall gone down? So that's what I'm saying. And Seaball, he's a lawyer too. He's a lawyer for the insurance companies. So I don't know. It just seems if Texas can do it, Louisiana's not that much different. I'll ask you this, and we can start segueing off to another topic here in a few minutes, but everybody mentions uninsured motorists. Uninsured motorists. That's all you hear. You hear it from the politicians. Uninsured motorists. How much effect do the uninsured motorists have on our high insurance rates?
We asked the actuaries that, and we talked about, we already have no pay, no play, so I don't really know why that keeps being brought up. I was in law school when Mike Foster did the tort reform of no pay, no play. And no pay, no play is very simple. When someone comes to me and they say, hey, my kid got hurt in a wreck, I'll say, does your child have car insurance? And if they say no, I say, well, they don't collect the first $15,000 of their claim. So if they have a $10,000 claim, they get zero. Now, the net effect of that, when it passed, was that people who don't have car insurance who get hurt go to LSU for their care. And so that bill was not paid by State Farm. It was paid by the taxpayers. So it was what we heard was no pay, no play, get those people to buy their insurance. It was actually, let's shift what State Farm owes, which is I pay him a premium to cover the harms and losses of someone I hurt. That's insurance 101. I pay a premium. So if I hurt someone, I pay for their harms and losses. So what happens is I hurt somebody, they don't have insurance, they go to LSU, the LSU bill does not get paid, and I don't pay them off my policy. But here's what they forgot to tell you in no pay, no play. Guess what? My rates go up even though nothing was paid from my policy. Let me say that again. I pay a premium as a Christian, so if I hurt anyone, their harms and losses are covered first by insurance, then by my assets. Okay? Because I hurt somebody, I don't want them to go without. You see, that's the concept of insurance. So that's it.
To a maximum amount, right?
No, I mean, there's
no. Isn't there a set amount for damages?
For what? No, there's no caps.
Now I may be mixing something here. Now I remember having a conversation with you, and you and I were debating on damages and a maximum. And I'm not a lawyer. See there, Rhodes Scholar, stupid Bill, but not a lawyer. On a maximum on a judgment or damages in a case. And the thing that's coming to mind, and I'm trying to prompt you here, is regarding a personal issue of yours. You explained it to me
Oh yeah,
one time, and
yeah. So that's
you may not want to go there.
no. I'll tell you. It was in 2007. The doctor who wasn't certified had been examining my wife for 9 months. He wasn't an OB. He was working at the local hospital. He botched Rebecca's delivery, put the internal monitor on my wife's cervix, not Rebecca's head. So for an hour, Rebecca died in the womb, and he was reading Susan's heartbeat, not Rebecca's. Susan lost about 3 to 6 units of blood, which is a lot. And she turned white as a sheet. I said, "Look, are you ready for the worst case scenario?" She said, "Yes." And, I've been dating her since airline back in the day. It's our third kid, supposed to be easy. And, the nurse came in with a bedside ultrasound because she knew the baby was dead, that the doctor had ruptured the placenta and not told us. And I'll never forget, he turned off the computer, put in his code so that he could bill the doctor's fee for the bedside ultrasound, not the nurse. And as soon as the computer reset, it was a 10-minute ordeal. And he put it on Susan's belly, and it read 50 beats, which I later found out was the lowest it could read. That's the zero on the speedometer, so to speak. And so they immediately took them 28 minutes to do an emergency C-section because they were understaffed. Susan did not pass out. She was awake. She saw them cut Rebecca from her stomach, laid her on a table, and they measure a baby with something called an APGAR score, APAR, and typically it's 555, 553. Rebecca was 000. That means her color was bad, her respiration was bad, and no heart rate at 0, 1, 5, and 15 minutes. So they revived her at about 22 minutes, and I read to her the night before in Susan's stomach, and we always read to our kids in the womb, and Rebecca would spin around when I would read to her. So I knew it was, I had done brain injury cases, so I thought, man, we're going to get her to a facility and she's going to be better. But then Susan, being a PhD psychologist with children with special needs, she was like, Ryan, she's not going to walk, talk, or anything. She was out for an hour and a half. So we spent the next 10 years just really keeping her alive. Her head sunk in. She had so many seizures. Her hips popped out of socket. We had Charlotte after that, and Charlotte could hold her. When Rebecca died, she weighed 28 pounds. Yeah, we've been changing her diaper. She was hitting puberty, and I think her brain just couldn't take the growth, So what's really unfair about the law is that marginal doctors who commit atrocious malpractice, they've gotten tort reform in 1976. And a lot of my friends are doctors, and they're against the cap. They said, look, the marginal doctors come in here, and Ryan, they can buy a $100,000 insurance policy, but they can't buy a $10 million policy. No one will sell it to them because they hurt people. And I began to explore that topic of tort reform. I had to go sit everybody in my family down that was a Republican and just say, hey guys, they said, Ryan, even though they were like, sue that doctor, sue that hospital for everything they have. I can't believe they destroyed Rebecca and then revived her after they should have let her stay in heaven. We even got to Dallas Children's when she was about 4 months old, and they asked us if we had her in a bathtub. Like, did you have it was terrible. And, but anyway, the law is that the doctor pays the first 100,000, and then a group, like a plan, pays the other 400. And so I had to explain to my family, like, she's going to get $500,000 if we win at trial. And I said, guys, this is why we're not going to trial. Number one, I'm not going to put my kids through this. Some defense lawyer asking my wife how many times we have sex and, is this really bad, and trying to run us out of the courthouse, because I experienced that, And so I had to tell the family, like, the way this works is that a Bossier jury would come back and say $100 million or $5 million, right? And the judge would thank the jury for their time, and he would say, I hereby reduce this award to $500,000. I said, I am not going to put y'all through that. And then it started kind of a crusade because no one knew about the medical malpractice cap. And there was a doctor in town named Dr. Pat Warden, who wasn't a neurosurgeon, but he did neurosurgery at Willis Knight and Piermont. And I think he did like 900 surgeries a year, and he had like 1,200 claims. And it was what happens, dude, because what you're kind of getting at, I hope I'm not talking too much, but the caps were put in place in 1976 to get more doctors to move to our state and to save them on their premiums. Well, guess what happened? The cap increased premiums because all these marginal doctors moved into our good facilities, right? And they started causing more $100,000 claims. And so the cap had a known, planned, not told to us reaction. And so I am highly skeptical of someone who says, oh, we're going to do this insurance reform and it's all going to work out for everybody, because I've been the victim of that. I mean, I'll tell you what, you go to Shriners and see some of these people, it's bad, so caps do not work.
Well, and that's my point, and that personal story of yours, that the point isn't our problem with insurance that we have it all regulated into a box and it won't move, and it's in that box because of, two lobbying groups that are basically pulling the strings and controlling the whole thing. And at the end of the day, all of us regular Joes out here in the public, we can bitch and moan about it all we want, but the reality is it ain't changing.
It ain't gonna change.
I mean, listen, it's a multi-billion-dollar. I mean, you think it's hard to change tops? Go try to take $20 billion from a corporation, from their profits that they've been taking out of the back pocket of hardworking people in Bossier and in the other 63 parishes. I mean, that's the battle I fought. And I look behind me and no one was behind me. No congressman, no U.S. senator, I got emails sent to me about how I was raising rates, which I thought was kind of unique because, I was the only one down there not being funded by insurance in my campaign. And so, no, I think you've hit the nail on the head. And once again, that's why when Elizabeth said, should I go to Tech or Vanderbilt? I said, go to Vanderbilt. And Catherine said, should I go to LSU or TCU? I said, honey, go to Fort Worth. And it breaks my heart because we love this state. And I don't see the change coming. What breaks my heart is that I have two partners, and any small businessman can say this. You have two partners that take 40 to 50% of your gross income and they never show up. And that's the insurance man and the tax man. And we have no one in Baton Rouge currently who has stood up to either one. Now they'll talk smack about it. But here's the thing, you don't get reelected if you stand up. Like Gaetz might be, because Florida's different. But I mean, if he was here and he was a congressman, he'd get recalled.
All right. So let's switch gears and look, let me just say this. I appreciate you sharing that story about Rebecca, because that's a really personal deal. I know y'all have used that as testimony before, but I appreciate you sharing that. With that said, let's switch gears. So we want to talk about getting reelected and taxes and all this. All right. So you were on Moon Graffon's show, I think during the race with Mills. And if I remember the number right, he said that you had voted for $8 billion in taxes. I'm pretty sure that was the number used. Now, to be honest, I didn't go back and check your voting record to see if he was right or wrong. Now, you have also, the famous word for you is calling you a rhino. As a matter of fact, I once upon a time called you a purple rhino. Okay. Yeah, that was back then. Anyway, so my question is, A, is it true? Did you vote for $8 billion in tax increases while you were a senator? B, are you a rhino? Are you a Republican? What do you consider yourself?
tax votes are tough because you have to like trust but verify on these votes. So the sales tax we voted on was a penny. And my test for taxes is they have to be fair and flat. Okay. Fair means everybody pays it, or as many people that you can get into the situation. Because if you start picking winners and losers, it's not a democracy. So fairness means, and flat means it's the lowest possible rate. Okay. So the budget in Louisiana in 2015 to 16 was set on July 1st of 2015. And Jindal had obviously left a what we called a bobby trap, not a booby trap, but a bobby trap for us, because he underestimated expenses and overestimated revenue so that he could balance the budget during the 2015 session. So when we got down there, it was obvious we were going to be $1 billion short the last quarter of the year. Now, I know we're all Republicans and we don't need any handouts, but when you really look at Bossier Parish, our school system is one of our largest employers, and BIPSI is actually an economic driver. Okay. So the cuts would have come to those two entities. So everybody that talked really big about cuts got a wake-up call 30 days into their swearing in. Okay? How big of a boy are you? You're going to cut, who's going to cut what? So we came together as Republicans and said, we don't want to do an income tax to fill this $1 billion hole. It wouldn't even work because taxes aren't collected until a year and a half after they're owed, right, or calculated. We're not going to do property taxes because that's not fair and flat. So the Republican concept was a sales tax, a penny. And I said, guys, look, I'd rather it be a penny because everybody pays it. Okay. And they started to exempt people on the top. I said, no, we're not going to exempt anybody. Okay. We have to make good with our bondholders because, we're a billion, 1.2 billion in deficit in the last quarter of a year. You can't cut it. There's not that much money left to cut, in a small, the 9 billion that's actually part of the budget you can cut. So I said, look, if I go to Lowe's and buy $100 worth of stuff I don't need, I'm not going to fill that 10 cents or that dollar. I'm getting it. But if you raise income taxes by 5% to get that billion, man, everybody's going to move to Texas in my area. So even though I don't even want to do it, my pledge in 2015 when I ran was I will vote for fair flat taxes, but I will not vote for taxes that are not fair or flat. So everybody thought the governor would not go for a sales tax because Democrats do not like what? Sales tax, because it's regressive. And their argument is they'd rather it be an income tax because poor people already are paying too much in taxes as it goes. It's a bigger portion of their total income, and I can get that, but we negotiated with them and they said, you know what? This is a unique situation. So we will be for a 1 penny limited sales tax. Okay. And it raised just enough money to hit the deficit. Okay. And we went back and forth with it. And finally it was agreed 27 months. I mean, we all in the Senate, I think we voted for like a 2-year or 3-year deal to get us to the next fiscal session and to kind of figure out how much they had underestimated revenue and underestimated expenses and overestimated revenue on purpose, like Enron did, so we were kind of wading through these Excel spreadsheets and we couldn't even trust them. And then when the governor's people in the legislature said, even though we're Democrats, we'll support it, it started a whole new thing on the far right because they said, yeah, we were for it, but now the governor's for it, so we're going to be against it. And I'm like, it was our idea. So that's when I kind of broke off from those guys because I realized, man, they're so worried about what the lobbyists think about them, And there was John Bell might get reelected in 2019 if he does a ribbon cutting for the Jimmy Davis Bridge. So we're going to do that. And man, if he solves the budget, he could be president one day. I'm like, dude, John Bell gave Bossier, that's all crazy stuff.
I got to get in here. All right. So several things, I agree with Matt Gaetz. I think we've got legislators, and in his regard, I'm saying it in the contents to the federal guys, but we've got legislators even in Baton Rouge, and you're telling me our population of our state is not increasing. I mean, we're outsourcing our kids, and yet our state government continues to expand, expand, expand. It doesn't get smaller.
Mm-mm.
And, we're talking about, you know, tax cuts or no tax cuts. And if we don't reduce government, we can't reduce the boot off the neck of the public. I mean, why is it that, we don't give back? Just like this past session. This
Mhm.
past session, we had a little bit of extra money to go around. And all those legislators were faced with a decision. The decision was pay down debt, enable us to be able to take the boot off the neck of the people a little bit,
Mhm.
or in districts so that, we'll look like the saviors of Rome.
Yeah.
And some people that didn't go along with the plan, like Northwest Louisiana, I mean, I ain't gonna say where they got the kick, but it wasn't in their butt, you
Yeah.
know? So I'm just saying, shouldn't our state legislature line by line, because obviously we can't trust departments to report effectively. You just articulated that just a second ago.
You can't trust them.
Shouldn't we if we're going to spend more money on government, shouldn't it be that we spend more money on our legislators, making them stand down there, have each one of these budgets of every one of these departments and go line by line on every single expenditure? I don't care if it takes 2 years to do it. But
I mean,
wouldn't that fix it?
but we already do that. That's the problem. House Bill 1 and 2, which are the budget bills.
Okay, you're telling me that the Department of Transportation, if you walk down there where you have to go to get commercial plates and you walk in the door in there and there's almost 7 people sitting at empty cubicles, they're not empty, they're sitting there, but 7 cubicles on there, and you're the only person in there, you're telling me that there's not any fluff there?
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Bull crap.
I agree with you, but the point, the effect an election year has. Let's just look at this year in just a myopic viewpoint, okay? 2023, there's a $1.2 to $1.6 billion surplus. There are already funnels in place because when I was there, we had a deficit. And so I handled a bill in the Senate called the Budget Stabilization Act.
We had a
Okay? And it was
deficit because we were spending too much, or we had a
no.
deficit because we were unwilling to cut stuff?
We had a deficit because as your state shrinks, your projected revenue goes down. It's like if you're at a church with 1,000 people, right? And you project your budget in June of 2015 that it's going to be $1.2 million. Okay. And then in December, that's based on monthly tithing, right? Or weekly tithing. Well, you get to December and 40% of your people leave. Well, you have budgeted for 1.2 million. You're only going to collect about 640,000. So you have to reshift the chairs on the Titanic. I'm getting it. And I've had to do this in my business before. I've had
Well, that
stuff
means you ain't going to
happen.
get your new Corvette next year. I mean,
I'm a Ford guy. So the point you hit is really important. And we're not 180 degrees off from each other. We're about 5 degrees. I'm going to share this information and I'm going to try to articulate it in a way where it makes sense. The surplus that we had in 2022 was a mirror image of the surplus in 2023. The same thing. It was forecasted, projected 1.4, 1.6, something of that nature. What was different is this. Here's why the election year made a difference this year. Because here's what the rules say. And you're bound by Robert's Rules of Order in some place. You're bound by procedural rules and the 3 branches of government. There's some things you just can't change. The surplus has to go to the rainy day fund first. And then it has to go to pay down retirement, a certain percentage of it. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. You can put in more, but we maxed out what we could put in the first funnel and the first silo and the second. And I wasn't there. I'm just saying I've researched this. The third funnel was paying down retirement debt. This year, they worked together to make the biggest one-time payment ever in retirement debt. Okay. Then after those three silos were fully satisfied under the law, right? There was additional funds, $500 or $600 million. Okay. That money has to be spent on shovel-ready projects or local things that the community says is important. Okay, let me give you an example. Up here, the Jimmy Davis Bridge, #1 priority right now. It's falling apart. It's an escape route for South Bossier. I mean, it's a big deal, right? But and our local leaders got together and said,
so escape route to Shreveport? I think David Montgomery would disagree with you on that.
Well, I think when you have a base like Barksdale, you have to have a lot of routes away from it and a lot of routes to it,
Right.
and that's part of it. So, but I understand. I get your joke. Sometimes I'm slow, but so the problem that happened was, like, people said, well, I can't believe y'all voted for $250,000 for band uniforms for East Cattle Gap Parish, right? And I said, guys, their local leaders got together and said, all of our needs are good. If you're going to bring back some of our tax dollars, earmark it for something we can't budget for as a parish, right? It's very important that our kids have art, music, and that kind of stuff. So these band uniforms are something they need. And you got to honor that request, because the best government is local government, right? That local government made that decision. That wasn't some legislator that said, hey, I'm going to get a bunch of band uniforms. He went back home, had a meeting with his police jury, city council, like I used to do, and say, guys, if there's a little bit of money left, I'm not going to pick what it's spent on. You govern best because you're closest to the people. You tell me, what are your things you need? And you wouldn't believe some of the stuff out here. Webster Parish had totally different requests than Bossier. Bienville had totally different requests. You know,
but that's not exactly how it goes.
Yeah, it is, actually, because I did it.
No, it's not how it goes, because John Bell Edwards said, okay, you legislators, but you, Dodie Horton, you, Raymond Cruz, or whoever, no, y'all, you're out. Okay.
So here's what happened.
Is that
here's
right?
What happened this year. Now, here's
if that be the case, Clay Higgins, as an example, he's on the Homeland Security Committee, and he's bucking on the Ukraine thing because we're not securing our border. By that definition, that congressional district shouldn't get any federal tax dollars. Is that
well,
right?
I think here's what I'll tell you about that. I think if you're not articulate in who you argue with and how you argue with them, and you fly off the handle to everybody because they're not in your party, you will never bring home anything. And none of your bills will get passed, because nobody likes playing with a bully. I mean,
because we're talking about compromise. Give me an example of compromise that
you don't need a compromise. I mean, I was at the South Bossier meeting, and the current legislator for District 9 in Houghton said, in order for me to get capital outlay, I have to sell my soul in compromise.
Okay,
then about 3 minutes later, in her speech, she said, I'm so proud that I got $220 million in capital outlay. And I looked around the room, I'm like, am I the only one that just heard those two things? So to get $220 million, you got to compromise and sell your soul to a Democrat demon.
So are you saying that district wasn't penalized?
No, here's what happened.
So you're saying they were. Okay.
I'm going to tell you what happened, and you should be proud of what happened as a conservative. They filled up those three silos, and there was money left. Our delegation, right, my senator, my rep said, these are the 10 things I want. And so the bill that has the wants in it, they voted for that. The bill that had the funding mechanism, they voted no. And everybody said, did you mean to vote no? Well, yeah, because we don't think we should bust the cap. Well, so you're basically saying you're agreeing ahead of time. You don't want the projects in the bill. No, I want my projects. I just don't want to go on record as having voted for the cost of the projects. And I've had business partners like that. And I have
So,
left companies over that. So if you and
so
I were in
you're
a hunting camp, if you and I were in a hunting camp, okay, and you said, Ryan, I want that $20,000 buck blind, and I go write the check for it, and we're 50-50 partners, you go, oh, look, I never intended on paying my half. Then I would say, well, you can go hunt in your boat. And you would say, that's fair. But what's unique of the reason our leadership has failed Northwest Louisiana, because they have been coached to try to sneak in and get projects, but not being part of the financial solution. What I did different is I said, look, if you will do a fair flat tax that Democrats hate, then these are the projects I want funded. And I'm not going to vote for it unless you do it this way. Now, that's a different negotiation tactic that was successful. So what happened at the end of the 20, I've talked to several people down there, is like what those Republicans were trying to do is they were trying to hold on to the identified surplus and push it into next year after the governor's election. So the next governor wouldn't have to deal with the sales tax. He'd come in with this surplus. And everybody down there was like, you cannot do that. If you identify revenue, you have to appropriate it. So the election year did have a lever on this session. Okay. And the lever was John Bell's out, right? His political career is really done. He's not going to run for anything else, right? So y'all save that money for me when I get in there. You see what I'm getting at? And for the first time in Louisiana history, they almost convinced him to hold over to you know how that's so illegal.
Okay.
But they were trying to get him to hold over the surplus to the next budget year.
Okay. Now I know that you have not been in the legislature, but I want you to know, I mean, we've got folks that are watching, and someone has sent me the fiscal note from the staff of the House, when they pass their budget. And Rex, if you'll share the screen, I want to put this up there. And I haven't read this, I don't know, but the inference is that, there's no deficit for fiscal year 25-26.
Mm-hmm.
And then Rex, I got to find the other one. So you pull it off of that screen.
Okay. Let me switch back to there. Can you switch now?
Yeah, hang on just a second. And yeah, now this one. And now after the expenditures, and Ryan, you're not going to have time to read these, but they'll be on the video. You can go back and pause them. But what they're saying, and I don't know if these are correct or not, but what they're saying is that this one is the most recent projection, and that it's now saying that there will be a $473 million deficit now that the money's been spent. So from one session, saying that, there will be no deficit, so let's spend the money, to now after you've spent the money, now the projection is we're going to have, Jeff Landry's going to have a $473 million deficit staring
at you. But I think what you're leaving out, the important integral part of your equation you're leaving out, is the sales taxes rolling off in the 24-25 year, because we did not want to make it permanent. And so that's projected. We could have, if oil and gas goes up, or if, there's a lot of things that contribute
that's
our
right.
Very fluid thing. So I don't really trust the 3-year out projections. I think the 2022, 2023 is probably accurate. I think the 2024, 23 is probably accurate. I think the biggest component part of the $473 million deficit in that third fiscal year is probably the rolling off of temporary taxes, which means that the Republican House and Senate knows that in 2 years for that third year budget, they're going to have to cut $500 million, and we're going to have complete control of the House and Senate and the governor. And I'm excited to see them cut $500 million because we couldn't do it when I was there.
So going forward, it's either we're going to have to raise taxes or we're going to have to cut $500,000 out of there.
Well, I'm going to tell you, I was in hostile territory as a Republican for 4 years. It was guerrilla warfare. I mean, I would love to serve Bossier Parish with a Republican governor and a Republican House and a Republican Senate. I think whoever wins these races, man, they're getting the green light. The governor is not going to veto any cuts, and he could cut. If he's got a $500 million deficit projected, he can go ahead and say, these are the things I'm going to cut. And he can put it in his proposed House Bill 1, and the Republican House will pass it. The Republican Senate will ratify it, and it'll be the first bill out in the 2024 session.
But couldn't we have taken that money and say, put it back into a savings account or something, or let Schroeder do I know Schroeder's going out the door, or invested in BlackRock to go invest in Ukraine to make us a Hunter Biden pile of money so that we could go forward and we wouldn't have to cut anything?
Yeah. Well, I think you would have to change the rules, because you don't want a legislature that's there temporarily part-time it's really tough to pass. When we did the Budget Stabilization Act, folks asked me well, Ryan, what if we have a huge surplus? I said, it's going to go to here, here, and here. And then you can waste, right? Go buy your band uniforms. But we're going to do retirement, budget stabilization, and the rainy day fund. And nobody ever thought we'd have a surplus. And so they all voted for it. Now we got this surplus, and the Republican House and Senate were so mad that they were hamstrung. And then they said, you know what? We're not going to spend this last part. So look, if I were down there, what I would have done is said, let's dump more money into retirement. Let's dump more money into the rainy day fund. Let's pass some kind of amendment to put more money in there to shore up those next year so we can lower taxes. But remember, that's not what the lobbyists want, because this business saying there's opportunity and confusion. Everybody down there's confused. Like none of them know.
If this is accurate, what I'm going to say is that everybody, and including the governor, they made a concerted effort, a pre-planned effort to sandbag the next governor coming in, who is Jeff Landry. This was I don't think the sales tax. The problem with creating these monsters of red and blue fights in Congress and in the state is you never really get to talk about balancing a budget. So we're always going to have a problem 3 years out. Yeah, but you're forcing, and you didn't have to. You just forced a Republican governor to have to make choices that are going to hurt people and make people uncomfortable. We could,
but we know the playbook, because what Jindal did, and Jeff Landry's not Jindal. Jeff Landry's smart. He cares about our state. He's an intelligent person. He is not going to let, and I hope, and this is my discernment of him, have sit in the room and talked to him before. He is not going to let petty politics bankrupt our state. I think he has the backing and the fortitude, if he wins, to say, hey, we got to do fair, flat taxes, or we're going to have this albatross around our neck. And so he's going to tell those legislators, he's going to say, look, if you do not plan in 3 years what to do, then I'm going to take control and do it. And that's the kind of leader he is. And I think these Republicans that have talked smack and talked big about cut, oh my goodness, they are really going to have to sit down and say, do I cut teachers? Do I cut LSU? Where do I cut this stuff? Because you're not cutting a $33 billion budget. You don't have control over it. You have control over about $8.7 billion. And we take a lot of that money, and we've already got it dedicated to federal matching funds. I mean, it's a 1 to 10 match on mental health. If you cut $1 out of mental health, you're taking $11 from Brentwood and the psych ward at LSU. No one's going to vote for that. So I think what will happen is, my prediction is that the corporations at the top that are getting $9 and $12 billion a year in tax cuts and handouts and bailouts, they're going to come to the table and say, look, cut us by 25%, get rid of the state income tax. And those are the kind of deals that are going to happen in a Republican regime. You're going to see major shift, because this opportunity created by this huge deficit coming is going to, people are going to have to be creative. They're going to have to set aside their differences, and they're finally going to have to either put up or shut up on the state income tax. And Duke, if we don't do drastic measures like that in the next 4 years, there's not going to be any Bossier to watch.
All right.
Okay?
So Mills has taken a lot of heat in the press lately over his vote to bust the spending cap and all that. It's been in the press. Mike Johnson and that whole crew has basically given him the whole cold shoulder. They're backing Adam Bass, all that. So I got to ask you.
Now, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Are you saying Mike Johnson supporting Bass? I thought he was supporting Mills.
Well, they did take a picture together.
Now, I thought Ryan was supporting Bass and Mike Johnson was supporting Mills. Do I have it backwards?
Well, that's where I'm getting confused, and I'm leading to my question here. So politics makes strange bedfellows. And I don't know if, Ryan, if you watched the debate that we had between Mills and Bass, but I got to know. So who are you supporting for your old Senate district?
So I've kind of changed back and forth because, I've been studying politics my whole life. I was only a politician for like 48 months. And, initially in that race, I was thinking, Mills is going to win. He's got Trump's endorsement. He's got Johnson, Seaball, Dodie Horton writing letters in his support. And then I went to the South Bossier meeting. Seaball and McConaughey were debating, and Seaball just started just tearing up Mills and his time to talk about that Seaball McConaughey race. And I was watching it online. I'm like, man, that's like Seaball went to Robert Mills's house in Southern Trace with Mike Johnson and got him to move to Bossier to run against me. You see what I'm getting at? Like, this is a huge paradigm shift. Because I had told Adam Bass, man, I texted, I said, you can't win without Johnson and Seaball. There's no way. He said, man, I would rather you like run for state rep or just practice your insurance business. Because I've known Adam a long time. He went to airline, I went to airline. We were kind of, and I just said, he said, man, I don't have it. They're not supporting me. I just prayed about it. And I'm winging this on my own. And so I said, well, heck, that's kind of what I did. 2015, I think that's pretty cool. And then I realized, well, maybe Seaball and Horton and Johnson are all supporting Adam. And so I went to Adam's fundraiser, and Matt Kay was running his campaign. And, and I thought, okay, well, that's odd because Matt's kind of Mike's guy. And then let's get Adam's probably going to win. If they've all jumped off Robert Mills's ship, then I got to figure out why, because I got to make a decision as a citizen who I'm going to vote for. And then I realized this as I was studying the data, because I actually ran a poll in that Senate race. A lot of people wanted me to run, and I ran a poll to show them there was no way I could run, no way I could win. And I ran the poll, and I had a very high favorability, and I won outright.
Wait, not to interrupt you, but hold on for a second. So that was your poll, the Survey Monkey poll from the Pelican Analytics and polling?
No. I wanted to do an in-depth poll. It was a voice poll where people actually called a live body and asked questions, because I don't trust the Survey Monkey stuff. I think there's a margin of error is too great. And I wanted to show my supporters, hey guys, look, there's no way. Oh yeah, I didn't see that.
Yeah, well, of course,
that looks nothing like me. So
okay, well, it's a little thinner, but
Yeah. So we ran that poll, and it showed I could win, and I just prayed about it and said, I don't want to do that again. I mean, my daughter's passed away. My brother just passed away. I really enjoy practicing law. I enjoy not missing any of my daughter's volleyball games. And so we didn't run. So in that race, what's very unique is my friends in Baton Rouge say, Gatti, it doesn't really matter who wins that, because y'all send down either insurance people or oil and gas people. Like, you get Robert Adley is a lot like Robert Mills. Adam Bass is a lot like Foster Campbell, not politically, but how they make their money, right? And so we're not sending down like different kinds of people. Like other parts of the state are sending down people that are subject matter experts in a problem they have, right? They'll send down a sheriff if they feel like crime is an issue. They'll send down a retired military if the National Guard's an issue. We don't do that here. We kind of respond to whoever Baton Rouge.
We just send lawyers down there.
Well, I mean, but
now it wasn't long ago we had a stable of lawyers from up here. It was like everybody was lawyers down there.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of lawyers in the legislature of all, like Alan Seaball's a trial lawyer. He didn't get beat up for that.
Well, you had Presley, Seaball. You were down there. You had Johnson down there. I'm missing one. There's another one. I'm not thinking of it.
Can't remember off the top of my head.
Was it Milkovich?
Yeah. Calvin Lester. At one point, how long ago was that? Wasn't he down there?
No, I think Calvin. Did Calvin go to Baton Rouge?
It's not as many lawyers as you think. I think though, my advantage down there was my subject matter expertise was the law. Having been a workers' comp judge and a small town attorney, and not really being fed by any one area of the law, because our firm's pretty elastic because we're small. Like we can help anybody with anything. So if they did total tort reform and I never had another personal injury case, I'm still going to be okay, right? So I had a little different view, and what I really loved about it is senators would walk up to my desk with a bill and say, "Hey, Gatti, what do you think we should do?" I'm like, "You can't vote for this, but I am." So we love those dynamics in the Senate, but I think lawyers have an advantage if they're the right kind of lawyer. I know that's what I experienced because I could draft my own bills. And if somebody called me with an issue around business, I could draft the bill myself, get it to the staff, where you're kind of at a disadvantage if you don't have any subject matter expertise. Because if you don't have any subject matter expertise from your upbringing or your background, then you're really just a politician down there and no one asks you for advice. And advice is kind of the commodity that you exchange for influence, right? So like someone who's an accountant would have more street credibility with other legislators than, let's say, someone who is a former lobbyist, right? Because that's not really subject matter expertise. So, so back to this Bass Mills race. I mean, oil and gas and insurance, but the unique thing about those two those two subject matter expertise that what brings them to the table as an expert actually could be adverse to our interest as citizens. And y'all hit on that with one of your questions, I think Robert Mills is probably pro operator in the Haynesville Shale and not so much pro landowner. So I represent a lot of landowners when I was in the Senate, not in my law practice, but just Haynesville Shale royalty owners, right? That's a bigger group than the operator. So I would tend to say, hey guys, I'm going to be pro landowner. Well, that excluded me from a lot of life. The insurance subject matter expertise in insurance is, that's a tough one because Jeff Landry's probably going to want to do premium reform. And we're going to send down 6 or 7, possibly 8 legislators from Northwest Louisiana who their income is derived from premiums being high. There's no way around it. And I love all of them,
So have you decided yet? Mills
I really haven't.
All right. All right. So we're not going to get an answer, a yes or no, and that's fine. I respect that. But what I do want to know, this is the one I really want to know. And I think Rex wants to know it too. And I think everybody else watching. So here's the one. Did Ryan Gatti participate in the recruitment of candidates for these legislatures? Because it's been said to me by several people, Ryan Gatti had a hand in the recruitment of an opponent against Dodie Hortman. Ryan Gatti had a hand in the recruitment of an opponent against Alan Seaball. And that's just the primary one. So I'm asking you, did Ryan Gatti have any conversations with either of those two candidates before their announcement about running in those races?
I have told everyone, even my children, to never run for office. And And they say, why? And I say, for 41 years, everybody loved Ryan Gatti. Like, they would, I'd see him at church, they'd give me a hug. I'd see him at Strawn's, how you doing? When God put it on my heart to run for the Senate in 2015, I had immediate, numerous enemies. Immediately. And what I tell anyone, even high school students that come to me and say, hey, I want to be a leader, I'll say, teach Sunday school. All right. Do not get into politics like that. That is not where we're going to change the world. We're going to change the world coaching softball, saying the prayer before the game, teaching Sunday school. I said, if you feel the gumption to run, go check on your elderly neighbors, bring them food, sit down with them, and then you will be fulfilled from that godly act. You will not be fulfilled from being in politics. Okay. It is only people running right now. It's the next step in their career, you know? And it was, I'd always wanted to do it. People encouraged me to do it. But no, I know Dodie really well. She and I worked together very well for 47 months and 30 days. She would forward her phone calls from her office to my Senate office. Okay. But the powers, she wrote me a text that said, you're my brother in Christ, thrice braided. Thank you for checking on my mom. I will not get involved in your race. You've helped me out a lot. Not 72 hours later, she wrote a scathing opinion of me on Facebook that I was nothing but a trial lawyer and a John Bell lackey. And this is after she and I worked very hard on foster care legislation. Dodie supported an increase in Medicare or Medicaid for families with special needs children. Okay. And I supported her in that.
So
okay?
I'm yes or no, you did or did not?
not.
Yes or no? You did not.
Chris, a lot of people call me when they're thinking about running, and I tell them the same thing. I said, does your wife love you? Do you love spending time with your kids? Do you have friends? Do you cherish those? Yes. And I told Chris Turner, do not run. I said, if you run, even though you're a 28-year U.S. Marshal, you're on the national M16 shooting team as an Iraqi veteran, that you've guarded, chief justices of the Supreme Court, you found Thomas LaValle's murderer. I said, those are all valiant things. If you want all of that erased with 5 mailers from the Louisiana Committee of Republican Majority, okay, it will happen. He said, no, it won't, man. I said, Chris, dude, I respect you. You went to boot camp with my brother. I've known you're a good Houghton guy. And he said, well, I just want to run. I said, you don't understand. You're running for something you want, but Dodie is highly protective of that $16,000 a year job. Okay. It is hers.
Well,
she spent 8 years under Henry, 8 years down there, and she is entrenched. She's a great person. I said, but she is not going to just have debates with you and shake your hand.
But,
I mean, she gutted me in Houghton. I was polling first in Houghton. And, Mike and Seaball went to her and said, write this nasty gram about Ryan. And she did it. She put it in the Bossier Press, Facebook. And now I can't be mad that she called me a trial lawyer, because I'll confess this. I've never had a jury trial. God has blessed me. All the big cases I've had, I've gotten that phone call like on TV, in those movies. I get that call 72 hours before trial, and they say, we're sending you what you want. We can't believe you fought us for 6 years. And I said, you should have known I had a child with a brain injury, and I'm going to try this case. And I don't care if I get 0, these families need justice. Now, because Mike and Alan called me a trial lawyer through those lobbyists, I have had some of the biggest cases in the history of Northwest Louisiana, but they're all secret. And I have been able to set up medical trust funds like we did for Rebecca for people. So listen, I told Chris not to run. I told Coach McConaughey, you know what happened to Coach McConaughey when he announced? And I told him this was going to happen. He said, Gatti, I think I'm going to run. I said, look, your dad and Skylar Marvin's dad desegregated the schools in Bossier. If your dad hadn't have done that, there would be no place for Shreveporters to move right now, except for Tyler, Texas, or Hot Springs. I said, that one thing that your dad did should qualify you to be a leader. I said, but you're probably not going to win, because Donald Trump's going to come down and just start pointing at your opponent, saying he's the best thing since sliced bread, because that's what happened to me. Okay. I said, Mike, I don't care that you're the winningest coach in basketball history in Louisiana. I don't care that your dad helped start Citizens Bank to bail out all the local business. I don't care that your wife was a teacher at airline. I said, I have similar, just not as good accolades. He said, no, Gatti, it's going to be fine. I said, don't run. Don't run. You're retired. Go enjoy life. Go enjoy your grandkids. And he announced, and as soon as he announced, they were about to name the gym after him at Northwestern for bringing all those boys from poverty to prosperity.
So
somebody made a phone call and said, hey, you can't do that because he has announced for public office.
So I'll take it from all that you're supporting Chris Turner.
Well, I think that this is what it comes down to. I take all the emotion. I learned that the National Judicial take all the emotion out. That's how I practice law. And I wrote down their qualifications, right, with no name on it. And I asked a few of my friends, I said, who own business, I said, which of these candidates would you let run your company? And overwhelmingly on a blind taste test, they chose Chris. And I said, why? They said his subject matter expertise is something that we could leverage. Now, they didn't say anything bad about the other resume. They just didn't pick it, And I showed that to a few other people that I respect their opinion. They didn't know what I was asking them about. I said, hey, man, before you leave the office, who would you pick to help me run my firm or to run your business? And they said, this dude, this Iraqi war veteran, 28-year U.S. Marshal, he's got connections. He wouldn't have made it 28 years without knowing how to negotiate. So I kind of had to eat crow because even though I wanted to protect my friends from the mailers and all that other stuff, I still think that Chris would do a better job. And I hesitate to say that because Doty will put tomorrow in a mailer, Ryan Gatti the Rhino is supporting Chris Turner. And it's gonna. So I can't even support people openly.
Okay. Well, let me break it down another way. You know me. In fact, when it comes to being conservative, in which I don't think there's me and Rex talk about the use of the term conservative all the time. Everybody's conservative, but on the scale of, reducing government and less government, ain't I I'm on the right of the food chart, right?
Yeah, I think you're more libertarian on that issue of government size than you're Republican. You're like for no government.
Yeah, almost.
And I respect that. I think that's
I'm not for no government. I believe the government's role is first and foremost the safety and defense of its citizens, and everything after that is an afterthought. That is the priority. It's the original purpose of government. We've gotten so far away from that original purpose of government that we've completely lost our way. It's why we're going off the rails, and we're probably going to be a failed state. Unfortunately, in my lifetime, and I'm going to have to, hopefully still be able to physically foster my kids through that time in our lives. But with that said, of everybody in this race, do you, in these races, the challengers, of all of them, I want to know which one of all of them are going to reduce government spending, are going to reduce the size of government in Louisiana. Because, to be honest with you, I don't know that any of them are. But I want to know from Ryan Gatti, which ones do you think are going to be most likely to do it?
I think that if you look at the track record, to really build a consensus to pass a fair flat sales tax is hard, because that's the first step in tax reform, right? Is to kind of trust but verify. Okay, we'll do our sales tax. And then what happened is everything fell apart over that because we had a Democrat governor and he was not going to get credit for tax reform. So we punted it at 7 years, right? So that the right team could take the credit. So I'm kind of waiting to see. I think the answer is, if you elect the most conservative governor, that's Jeff Landry. He will have the catbird seat. He will be in charge of House Bill 1 and 2. He will hold capital outlay at abeyance until the budget is balanced under conservative values. And I think he's going to have enough power that it really won't matter who we elect. Because, I mean, it'll matter in some ways, but in the one silo you're talking about of shrinking government, I mean, the governor's going to decide that, you know.
And he will be excoriated in 4 years for it too. Everybody will come out of the
but
woodwork.
but Duke, that is the nature of leadership in the fourth quarter of the world. The book of Revelation talks about it. You know, our founding fathers talked about it. This is not a surprise. Jesus said, don't be surprised in the end times when this stuff happens. I mean, if you do the right thing, you're not going to be crucified, but you will be canceled. Okay. And I think Jeff Landry has the guts to say, I care more about Louisiana than if I get canceled or reelected. I mean, he's lived an excellent life of service. You know what I'm getting at? He's held a lot of jobs and he's a damn good lawyer. You know what I'm getting at? I mean, he is good.
Where are other politicians like that? You know, Matt Gaetz is the only example I see. Where are the other ones at?
Well, I think the founding fathers said the party system was going to destroy. I mean, you know where they are? You know where our mayor of Bossier City for 2025 is? He's running his dad's company in Fort Worth. He left 30 years ago. I mean, people do not want to get into politics. All right. I've had several people tell me, Ryan, if I got into politics like you did, I actually have baggage. You didn't. So I'm not going to run. And those generals and colonels and business owners.
Wait a minute. Let me hear that
leaving
again.
The state.
Did you just say you're not going to run? Ever?
Oh yeah, I don't have any plan ever. I'll tell you, I have a complete Christian peace that I have done that. God has shut that door. There is, I will never spend that much time away from my family in a way where people are disrespectful of my children and lie about me knowing it's a lie and then tell me they knew they were lying about me. I mean, we've lost family members. People don't talk to me anymore because they think I voted for John Alario for president. You know what I'm getting at? And I'm just like, I'm like, hey, John Alario was the only candidate, and it was 39-0. You know,
I've gone the opposite arc with you, and we've talked about this before, where I shape my opinion of you based on the opinions of others, and there were a couple of instances a few years ago where I was like, let me kind of rethink Gatti and start looking at it, and part of it was the insurance deal, but it actually started before that. Anyway, so the point being that, I suspected that you were going to run for office again. We were all getting the surveys and what's everybody, what's Ryan going to do? Is Ryan going to run and all that? So I kind of want to at least get it out of your mouth that you don't plan to run again.
So I feel like I'm almost 50. My kids are living in different states. I've got a great law practice. My clients love me. They cried more than I didn't cry at all when I lost. I was relieved. People were at my house weeping, and I'm like, look, God opens doors, He shuts doors. I was like Trey Gowdy used to say, he wasn't a congressman that went to church. He was a Christian that happened to be in the Congress. I said, my identity hadn't changed. This job was not that big a deal to me, And so I think what you're going to see is that the people you have to sell out to get the money to run. I mean, why does a U.S. senator care about a state Senate race? Why does a president of the United States care? Because someone would leverage, call him up and say, hey, I want to cash in my political equity with you, not to fix I-20, not to dredge the Red River, not to bring back the A-10s to Barksdale. Would you come down to the CenturyLink and endorse my buddy? I bet Trump couldn't get down here fast enough. He's like, you don't want $1 billion for all the help? Yeah, no, man. I just need you to endorse some of my buddies for governor. Do you want to go today or Monday? I mean, he was like, man, I'll give your portion now to Tyler, Texas. You know, so we have really held the wrong people accountable for the wrong reasons. And I see this happen in court all the time. And we walk out, I'm like, you know, the judge was right, but he didn't have all the facts, you know? And so that's what we're seeing now. We're seeing kind of an unraveling, and these elections are all important. You know, the Milkovich-Presley race, very important for the Senate. You have one of the most pro-life senators in John Milkovich. And you have Thomas Presley, who's a great insurance defense lawyer. Okay. I think Presley's going to win that. And it's sad because John Milkovich did the heartbeat bill and he got kicked out for being a liberal. You know,
Well,
I'm thinking, man, that is pretty bold. If Seaball says you're a liberal, you're out.
All right. I want to transition a little bit. I want to go backwards a little bit more. And all right. So, you know, and I don't remember the exact timeline about how all of this went, but I do remember some quotes. I remember specifically, and you probably know by now, I use the term walk on water to describe somebody. And walk on water, we were having a little bit of a debate. And, you know, it was kind of at a point after a commitment was made to support somebody for state representative. And then, of course, another candidate got in that race all of a sudden who happened to be a Sunday school teacher. And, you know, in that little bit of a confrontation, you know, the discussion was that, and Walk on Water said, you know, look, we couldn't take no chances that Ryan Gatti would have control of a Senate seat and a House seat.
Right.
And
that sounds pretty scary. You know,
look, he even threatened to burn down the church. And don't take my word for it. Raymond Cruz was there. He heard it.
I think I'm losing my connection. I think I'll have to sign off now.
Wait, our numbers are going to go up because we mentioned First Church. Hold on a minute.
Well, you know.
Well, I want to make sure nobody misunderstood who I'm talking about. Walk on Water. I'm talking about Congressman Mike Johnson. And that's what the man told me. So I'm asking Ryan Gatti because I heard an interview with Moon Graffone where Moon Graffone ripped Ryan Gatti one upside and down the other and said Ryan Gatti threatened to burn down the church. Now, I want to know, did Ryan Gatti threaten to burn the church down?
No, I think that really caught me off guard because I've always listened to Moon, and we texted back and forth a few times, and I went to that interview and I didn't really understand what was unraveling or what was going to happen in the next week with me. And I really thought he was asking me in to kind of, I brought a Bible for him because I know he's a Christian. I brought some other stuff. I was going to apologize to him for some things I said about him. And usually before I go on the air with any of those TV or radio, we talk a little bit about what we're going to talk about so that I don't get too far off. I said, Moon, I want to thank you. He goes, don't talk to me. We're saving it for the air. I'm like, okay. Then I realized Mike had been in there with him for the hour and a half before. And it hit me, okay, he's mad at me about something. And I've never met this guy in person. All right. And for about 10 minutes, he just screamed and yelled at me. And I just sat there just praying like, Father God, please don't let him hit me because he's mad, you know. And I couldn't get a word in edgewise. And then I realized, man, like my wife called me after that interview. She said, are you okay? I said, look, you know, we buried Rebecca. Like, this isn't bad. Like, I have to always go back to that. Like, what's the worst thing I've been through? This is not that bad. 100 years from now, we'll all be somewhere in eternity. So I just kind of got to my coping skills, you know, and as a man. And I said, no, I gave him the Bible. I left, and he was so mad and angry, and it was real. And I just don't like having people upset with me. And I said, you know, maybe it's something else. Then I realized it was kind of like a political move to get me out. And like the next night, Trump endorsed Robert Mills at the Century Tale. And the next week, like 50 mailers went out saying I was a liberal. They would send mailers to the Republicans that I was a liberal and mailers to the Democrats that I'd given money to Trump, which was true. So, I mean, it was one of those things where, man, they don't want me in there. I must have done something right, So, so that rumor, I couldn't really figure out like why the rumor was spread, and because I thought maybe it's because my brother's in prison. They're trying to say I'm really like a mafia guy, like that mailer, and they're trying to say I'm not really a Sunday school teacher and that I don't really go to church. I couldn't really figure out, and it had the effect they wanted because I was like, man, this is bad. My mom and dad were crying over it, and they're elderly, and I was just like, my kids were like, what is going on, And I said, then it hit me like a month later. My mom went to Bossier High School. We grew up in the street behind Two Johns, Bardot. That's where mom and dad still live. We grew up in a poor neighborhood, right? A lot of my friends are African American, right? And so I never really knew why they tied that lie to me because it was so outlandish that all my buddies were like laughing about it. And then it hit me. My mom was at the subway over there by the old Kmart on Airline, and she saw one of her African American friends from back in the day at Bossier High School. And my mom's in there on her walker, and she goes, "Hey, Sally, I hope you'll vote for my son Ryan." He goes, he burns churches. And so I didn't lose the race from them saying I wasn't a Republican. The 4 or 6 points that decided the race were that the people who I had built relationships in the community that were different than me, they destroyed that with one lie. And it broke my mom's heart because then I had to tell her again, Mom, I know you're getting older. Of course I didn't do that, And then, she'd ask me again a week later, or did that hurt your feelings, baby? I'm like, Mom, I'm 48 years old. Like, this is not bad. But it was a calculated lie. And I've forgiven everybody for it. It was like 6 years ago. I forgave everybody. I've moved on. But I think on a show talking about politics, that's why I warn people, don't run because they will lie about you.
I totally appreciate, what you're saying. What wasn't that the beginning of the breakup of First Church? Wouldn't you agree?
Well, I think what happened is you and I have always kind of agreed we shouldn't have politics in church. Okay.
Well, I don't know if we completely agreed. I'm going to disagree.
Well, I mean, but we agree on the because you're like extreme like separation of politics and I think like, hey,
I blamed Mike Johnson for, I'm going to say it this way, your mistakes, because I know that you did politicking in church, but it was right after Mike Johnson started doing it. And Mike Johnson, in my opinion, gave you the idea. Now that may not be true.
I think the wounds from the first Bossier breakup, and I've never really talked about it publicly, and I don't know if I'm happy you brought this up or not, but I was on the search committee that found Brad. Dr. Fred asked me specifically to be the vice chair of that transition team, and I spent probably 6 months studying candidates. I mean, it took a toll on me. And then, when Pastor Brad came in, I was his best friend. I watched his kids for him. It was great. And then I think something just happened, and one day I got called to a meeting, and it was like a really bad meeting, and I didn't know why I was there, why I was getting in trouble. And then I realized it was politics. And I said, well, I'm a sitting state senator. I can't really be out of politics. Like, this is all I do every day. I'm working 80 hours a week in this part-time job, and I got a staff of 1 to help me. And I don't know, it just came down to, it was kind of weaponized in a way. And I guess because I was the first, my brother and I were the first people it happened to, that it was new and different. And it was hard on our family. One of the most, I guess it was kind of mean, and now I know it was politically motivated, is that Catherine, my oldest daughter, is called to missions, and we'd gone to El Salvador, and she loved it. And I said, baby, if God's calling you to missions, I'll go with you anywhere in the world. She was like 14, and so every year we went to Haiti, and we got assigned to Bossier, Haiti, which was really weird because I was in Georgia getting trained, and They said, "Hey, you're going to Bossier." I said, "No, man, we're from Bossier. It's pronounced Bossier." She goes, "No, you're going to Bossier." And I'm like, "Wow, that's a God moment." So I'm leading the teams to Haiti, and when all this political stuff was, we went every November, and all this political stuff was happening. I think it was the Jenkins Johnson race, and of course, I was supporting Oliver. He's a Marine, F-18 fighter pilot, speaks French, very wealthy, a lot like Gaetz. I'm getting at like no BS. Just we're gonna move forward. And I liked him. And what got me was he was the only pilot in the air on 9/11. His F-18 Hornet was the only one allowed on the West Coast, and he was going to drop bombs in Afghanistan. He's like a real American hero. Would have entered Congress with subject matter expertise. Would have been on the military committees. Would have helped Barksdale. So I just picked Oliver. Well, I didn't know that was going to devastate my family. And so anyway, I got a call one day from the mission company out of Georgia, and they said, "Hey, is Rebecca okay?" And I said, "Yes, she's fine." They said, "Well, why did y'all cancel your flights to Haiti? The trip's in 2 weeks." I said, "Man, we haven't canceled our flight." I said, "We are ready to go on this mission trip. I got a team. We've been praying, practicing, packing. Like I promised the people of Bossier, we go." So we haven't canceled anything. She goes, "Oh, let me make a phone call." She goes, "The church has kicked you off this trip." And I just got this huge lump in my throat. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, it's happening. What everybody said would happen is happening." And that night was the FC. I'll never forget this. I didn't know how to tell Catherine because she had fundraised, sold T-shirts, Bossier to Bossier. It was her calling in life. And the FCA banquet was that night. And Terry Slack called me and said, "Hey, we're going to give you an award." And I'm like, talk about freaking mixed emotions, get kicked off a mission trip in my church, and Terry's going to give me an award. And I'm like, ugh. So I show up, and I said, "I'm going to tell Catherine right now." So I said, "Catherine, I know you know all this stuff going on at church. They've kicked us off the mission trip." And she started bawling, and I started crying. And she went to never would have run. I wish I never would have run. And then it hit me. Why do you kick a sitting state senator off a mission trip? So the rumor mill will go wild. He's cheating on his wife. One guy said, "Ryan, I'm praying for you because I know you're cheating on Susan." I'm like, "Dude, I'm so fat and Susan's so beautiful. There's no way I'm going to risk that. We've been dating since airline high school." He's like, "Oh, that makes sense." And then all these other rumors started flying as to why I got kicked off the mission trip I was leading, because you don't kick people off a mission trip. You kick them onto it. You said, we were kicking people onto the mission trip who needed it. And so that was the unraveling. And it was a really, really down time. And then like 6 months later, Rebecca died. And I told the kids, we're not mission church. The pastor I was teaching first grade and I was teaching freshman year and freshman boys. And we stopped going for like 2 weeks. And he sent the high school pastor to my office at 9:00 at night to tell me not to come back and teach. And I said, and the guy was crying telling me this. He said, "Look, you're my best teacher. I'm leaving soon too." Okay. And so it was just a devastating time because we had really poured into that church and so I just said, "Look, we're not going to miss church." So we loaded up and went to Cyprus the next week. And I was like, "God, just give us a sign," because we're going to visit every church in town, even St. Jude's. It's like, where should we be? Where can you use us? And before the service started, Pastor John called up the women's minister. And I'm sitting right there with Susan and the kids. He says, "Hey, we're going to start something called Night to Shine. It's a handicap homecoming." And I'm like, does he know we're here? Does he know we have a handicapped child? And so it's just like God punching us in the gut saying, "Stay here, put on your pew belt. I'm about to bless you." So we for a split second, I thought about never going to church again. I don't think anybody would have blamed me. But
so let me be
that
clear.
was a really tough time. And then what happened was our house, the stable, like over the next 3 years, folks would come by and apologize to me and say, I'm like, "Dude, I've moved on." And we would hug, cry, and say, "Look, I completely forgive you for the stuff you said." And it even happened up until recently. I was at Cassio's eating lunch, and my AP English teacher from airline came up crying. I thought something had happened. She gave me a hug. She goes, I just want you to know, you were one of my best students. You were my student of the year. Will you forgive me for all the things I believed about you that were said? And I'm like, I'm not crying. These are allergies. I was like, man, it's like, wow, of course I forgive you. I love you. You know what I mean? Best thing that ever happened is I didn't get that job for 2 terms. So people don't realize when I tell them not to run, like the devastation that happens, the ripple effects. It's a devastating thing. And, we're Christians, so we forgive, we move on. I mean, this ain't the worst thing that's happened to me,
Well, look,
so
that I get it. I can testify to that. I mean, I found myself on Al Jazeera, getting threats from Muslims around the world. Okay.
Yeah.
All for what? I was running against 2 brothers, Christian
Right.
brothers,
Well,
and
and what happened and what was unique is that in the race with you, Robbie, and Raymond, I told Robbie many times that Duke's going to win this. He's a member of Lobby. He sits on their committees. He owns a mortgage company. He's a retired fireman. He's outspoken. He's for small government. He's like the perfect guy for District 8. Robbie, you're probably not. And I think me being in there is going to hurt us. I said, now the smart move would be elect people who are, because at that special election, we knew who the governor was. And if we'd have been smart as a community, we'd said, Robbie, finish out Mike Johnson's term with John Bell and get as much capital outlay as we can. And then we're done after one, because you will not get reelected working with John Bell. But no one anticipated the terror Robbie went through. He got death threats too. And I sat back and said, kids, this is a $16,000 a year job. Somebody wants it a lot worse. We have stumbled onto something where these votes really matter to people, And so you were devastated in that race. I was, because it was my brother. And it's no secret, the hell he went through.
That's
and
right.
that you went through, and that he hasn't recovered from that. Like he got, as a result of him saying, I want to run, Robbie had sold his business as a successful physical therapy clinic, sold it to be the missions pastor at First Bossier, was taking people to Iraq and Iran on secret mission trips. And he was fired over that.
Well,
it's devastating.
It wasn't just the detriment that your brother, myself, but more importantly, it ended up destroying First Church. I would argue that, and really it started before that. And Rex, you share my screen. I mean, this image, I keep it. This was a crowning moment of it. This is, look at that room. You were in that room.
Yeah.
I mean, you were in that room. This was a who's who of politics at First Church. You've got Bill Cassidy. You've got yourself. You got David Vitter. You've got Richard Ray. You got MJ. You got Alan Seaball. That's just who I know. I mean, are we talking about how we're going to make First Church better there that day? I mean, that's why I shouted about it. That was why I always criticized it, and I think I ended up being proven right, that because it ended up destroying that church.
Well, and I think it was prophetic, because the Cassidy race was an important race. And anytime he went to talk somewhere, I'd go to the meeting. And I think Richard and I were there because he was chairman of the PEC and I was the vice chair. So I kind of felt obligated to go. And we let him know that we had just voted earlier that day to endorse him for the U.S. Senate, and as a PEC. And so, yeah, but I realize your warnings now. I mean, it's significant, and yeah. Boy, we're really coming up with some great memories tonight. I appreciate you. I'm gonna send you all my therapy bill tomorrow. Thank you. I have a 90-inch square TV I'm watching all this on. This is really great.
You're
Thank
gonna
God
have
I
to.
live with a PhD psychologist, you know.
So I was gonna say you're gonna have to call Susan and have a session with her immediately after leaving the show.
Well,
So
it's okay, baby. You can cry. You can cry. Cry it out.
Yeah. We'll start kind of wrapping it up for tonight, but I want to ask one question though. Going back to First Church, did Jerkovich ever like call you and fire you, or you mentioned that some other people told you that that the plane tickets have been canceled and all that? How did that work? Did he call you in like to the?
It was. I considered him a very. I don't have a lot of friends. I'm introverted, so if I got 3 people I talk to, that's my wife, my dog, and my kids. Okay, and my brother every once in a while. But I'm more of an outgoing introvert, so I don't have a lot of friends, and so I considered him a good friend. And I think a lot of people did. And I will never say anything bad publicly about him because I'm very worried about in any way affecting God's will with the church. There's always pruning and grafting that happens in the body of Christ. I don't think any of us would have wanted that Tower of Babel moment to happen where there's this diaspora of DNA from First Exposure going all over the Northwest Louisiana. But unfortunately, Tower of Babel moments happen and people spread out, and good things happen from that.
Good.
Every
Good
time
enough.
I see him, I shake his hand. I try to give him a hug. I'm worried about, as someone who was lost for a long time, and I kind of thought I was going to heaven, but I realized I wasn't when I started reading my Bible. My concern is not for the church people who are heaven bound and how they process church fights. I'm worried about my lost friends I was trying to reach to get to go to church, and then they consoled me about how I was treated. I mean, my friend texted me from a deacon's meeting, and I was a deacon there, and he said, "Man, I'm praying for you. I didn't know you were bipolar." And I'm like, "I didn't either." He said, "Well, we're all praying for you in Susan's marriage too." And I'm like, "Well, do you know something I don't know?" Because, and then I realized it was a full court press to get me out of the Senate. Because what they figured out was that the reason I got elected is because I was highly involved in my church and I was highly involved at Providence Classical Academy. Okay. Those were 2 places where I spent a lot of my time, talent, and treasure. And so they methodically undermined both of my bases in Bossier. And I was still ahead in the polls. So they brought Trump in, who I supported. So I just hope if people are listening and they're saying, "Man, that's why I don't go to church." I'm going to tell you the best decision I made in 2002. Catherine was 2 years old and she woke me up to go to church with her. And I didn't like going to church. I felt convicted every time I went to church. I was doing stuff I shouldn't have been doing. Not bad, but just I wasn't living a godly life. And that little 2-year-old came in after throwing up all night. And I told Susan, she was pregnant with Elizabeth, I said, "I'll stay home with the baby. You go to church." And I went right back to sleep. And Catherine came in her dress and her sandals, those mean church sandals with little gold things that, they should never design those. She had her sandals on. And that was always a fight on Sunday mornings with her when she was 2. And she woke me up and said, "Dad, I want to go to church." And I thought, man, it's got to be 1 p.m. And it was like 9:45. So I said, "Oh, Dad, I really want to go to church." So I said, "I'll go to church." And we went to church, and I always sat on the back row because of traffic, right? I wanted to get out. And then she wanted to sit on the front row. So we sat on like the 3rd row. And the preacher preached out of the book of Nehemiah. And I guess I'd heard that story before, but they built a wall, right? Everybody did their part. The baker, the bread, everybody did their part building the wall to protect from the enemy. And so that was his thesis was everybody does their part in the kingdom. And then he kind of said, and we all need to do our part leading people to Christ. He said, even children can lead people to Christ. And man, I'm sitting there thinking, whew, I'm only here because my kid invited me. So they did the altar call, and I'm an ex-Catholic, so I didn't know the whole lingo of everything. And so I looked down at Catherine, I thought, man, I think God's talking to me specifically. So I said, hey, anybody wants to get saved, come up, say a prayer. So I just stood up and I walked up, and this is how lost I was and how much of a fake I was. The guy said, do you want prayer? I said, no, I need to get saved. So man, if you go through the experience of salvation and it's real, none of this stuff matters. It doesn't matter. So when my daughter led me to Christ, and so when you think about why we're here and what we're here for, man, a church can kick you out, but they can't erase your name out of the book of life. You know what I'm getting at? So if you're out there and you're like, man, should I even go to church? Man, they fight so much. I'm going to tell you, the church is a hospital for sinners. Okay? It is designed for you to come broken and get something fixed. And if the church you're at is not serving you in that capacity with the ointment of the Holy Spirit, there are plenty of churches in town where you as a man consider. I'm going to tell you a fact. If I had not done that day, I don't think God would have probably asked me again. You know what I'm getting at? And so I hate talking about church hurt and not putting it in the proper perspective. You know what I'm getting at? That all of the hurt we felt from that church pales in comparison to a salvific moment in the life of a family member. So please don't hear me saying all church is bad, okay? Because it's not. No church is perfect because you're a member of it, okay? That's why. So just remember, I hate talking about the first. I hate talking about the first Bossier debacle without talking about the saving grace of Jesus Christ. Because as confused as I was in 2016, in 2017, 2018, 2019, I always knew that if my heart stopped beating, my last breath of earthly air would be breath of heavenly air. Because God does not expect perfection. He expects progress through a relationship with Jesus Christ. So I know we can't get too Christian, but I don't want any of my buddies, because some of them are texting me, I don't want any of them to think that I think they shouldn't go to church. Okay. Because I think once you stop going to church, you have carved yourself out from the herd, and Satan prowls like a roaring lion looking for anybody to devour. And when we watched those shows growing up, the lion never went to the middle and grabbed the person. He always grabbed the straggler, and none of us deserve to die a straggler's life. So look,
Yeah,
that
and
was
I
a
don't.
lot of people. I've had to counsel a lot of people that have left First Bossier, and they expect me to give them venom and talk bad. I'm like, no, look, Tower Battle moment, keep your eyes on the cross, not the storm. Double down on your salvation. That's kind of a gambling term. I probably shouldn't say it, but double down on your salvation and move on,
Yeah, and I don't think that's what you're saying, because that was certainly not our intent of highlighting, in our past shows, not even with you, but
Oh, I know it's
as you said, the debacle. But in the same token, as a Christian, we got a responsibility to salt and light. We are called to, say it like it is. And you have known before we ever even started this show, my passion against politics in the church. And this is a prime example, and it's a good lesson for everybody to guard your faith. It is exactly that lesson.
And and you've talked on this before, there's a delicate balance that has to happen in the church, where I've heard some pastors take the stance that I'm going to be with anybody that's pro-Israel and anti-abortion. Okay. And that's a good spot, but I mean, when you start letting politicians, because one thing I told the pastor was, don't ever mention my name from the pulpit, because half the people don't like me now that I'm in office. So the polling will tell you that I'm not going to get reelected. Don't say Ryan Gatti did a good thing, because even if I do a good thing, I don't need any accolades from a pulpit. Okay. That's not why I'm doing it. And I think that offended a lot of people, but look, if I hadn't have been following Christ when Rebecca was born and died, I'm not sure I'd still be married. I'm getting it because there's nothing in my genetic makeup. I mean, I'm half white trash and half redneck. There is nothing in my predisposition that allows me to handle tough times. It is the faith in Christ that gets a man through these days. And I know y'all are faithful people, but I just didn't want to talk about church hurt without talking about church ointment. Because I'm very worried that in the fourth quarter of the world that we should not ever miss an opportunity to encourage our brothers to explore who Christ is and what he could do for them, even outside of the church, but specifically to get into a church. I'm still, even though all I went through, I'm a believer in the church.
Half trash, half redneck. Are you saying you're from Ruston?
Yeah, funny
my dad's from Keithville, my mom's from Rodessa, so you can kind of.
Yeah, well,
we don't even do 23andMe. We're not allowed to.
And aside from, Mr. Houghton over there trying to make jokes about Ruston, I really appreciate you sharing that, Ryan, because we did have a couple of comments, that went by about, this is why I don't go to church anymore type comments. And that's
but just know that I think that unfortunately churches break up and churches disagree with their pastor, but, nothing can open your eyes to walking by faith and not by sight like listening to a sermon online in the morning to start your day, or reading your Bible and just asking God to help you understand it. And we've seen a lot of men come to Christ at our little barn, and it's always so fulfilling, because we know that if a child comes to Christ, only about 3% of the time does a family follow. Okay. If a mom comes to Christ, only about 17% of the time does a family follow. When a dad comes to Christ, 93% of the time, his whole family follows his example. So that was my one fear when I saw this unraveling in 2016. I thought, or 2017, I'm like, man, this is. I was so fearful, and I've seen people at Sam's who've said I've stopped going to church. I'm like, man, please go to church. Please read your Bible. Come to my house. That's not a real thing that happened. That's not what the church is supposed to be. And
do you think Mike Johnson will take any ownership in his role? I don't think he will. I'll say it. I don't think he will at all.
I've known Mike since my first day at LSU. We were Kappa Sig fraternity brothers, and he's a very intelligent, articulate man. And he's got great hair too, so I've always kind of wondered, what he could have accomplished, had it not been for the folks who mentored him in Baton Rouge, were very heavily involved in teaching up and coming politicians to get into the church, get behind the pulpit. And I was never going to take that path, because it's a precarious thing when you're telling people vote for me, or we're going to lose the right to pray in school. I don't think that's in the purview of government. I think I prayed in school, even when they told me I couldn't. I think when you play on the heartstrings of people, and like those guys like that, know that we can't help as Republicans and Christians from overreacting to those stimuli of, man, there's transgendered people reading to kids in Miami, and I'm going to stop that from happening. Like, dude, that's not happening in Bossier. I got to stop gay marriage from coming to your church. I'm like, man, homosexual people aren't getting married in our church. They get married at Bay Virginia Park. We don't have that here. I mean, even the people that provoke racism, right? And y'all have heard this story, but Martin Luther King came to Shreveport, right? He was a great leader, a great speaker, and he was telling a group, hey guys, if you do what I'm saying, you could live in a house like that. And one of the guys with him said, well, that's my house. You know what I mean? And so That's why we don't have, because of Barksdale Air Force Base and some other things in our area, we have a little bit of racism. We don't have that stuff. I mean, our sheriff almost got sued for saying, "In God we trust." We don't have, we have a church on every corner. I mean, this is the Bible Belt. I mean, our abortion clinic's gone. First abortion clinic in the United States to be shut down. You know what I mean? Back before the laws changed. So I think that we have become accustomed to fear mongering to get us to vote for stuff, and I don't know that we're going to get cured of that. I think it's something we're going to have to deal with.
Well, we will try to solve that as one show at a time if we can. So we're at 2 hours and 50 minutes now. So you have the distinction of being in one of our longest shows. not the longest, but one of the longest. And I want to thank you for coming on. It's been a very interesting discussion. I'm, sure everybody watching, or let me rephrase that. I'm sure not everybody watching or commenting agrees with you or, whatever, and that's fine too. But it's been a really good show. We're still holding at over 100 people, been about 120 people at 2 hours and 50 minutes. That's pretty good.
Or probably 50 of them are my family because we're pro-life and prolific. So we're probably a lot of them are Gattis watching. So.
Right. I knew the numbers were up. So.
Well, look, y'all don't know how much I appreciate you letting us talk about these things. And I appreciate y'all for having this show and investing the time in it. Everybody talks about doing stuff like this, but y'all have invested money in your technology. You have invested time in getting ready for the show. And, I appreciate y'all finally inviting me on your show. I'm joking. Yeah. I know you invited me before.
Somewhere I have a comment for that.
I was going to say, wait a minute. We got another 3 hours ahead of us. We haven't gotten anywhere.
Yeah. I appreciate y'all.
No.
Well, we'll look forward to coming you back. Yeah, you're welcome anytime. And we've got some more stuff that I'm sure we'd like to discuss with you too next time you come on.
Yeah, maybe after all this election stuff is over, we can talk about some local stuff.
Yeah.
That'd be very interesting.
Sounds like a plan. Mr. Lowry?
Right, thank y'all. Have a good night.
All right. Thank you, Ryan.
Well, I'm sure we will get some criticism that maybe we should have went after him on this. We should have went after him on that. Or, maybe we was too nice or maybe we weren't, or, then we'll get compliments as well.
Yeah. Well, look, it's like we've said, with every guest, if a guest is going to come, take the time to come on, especially and stay on for, nearly 3 hours, we're not here to beat them up necessarily. We're going to ask some questions. We're going to push back against certain things, but that, it's not here to be a gotcha, because the truth is all they have to do is hang up and not be on the show.
Absolutely. And
I want to say this, and I've said it before, but, and I mentioned it during the show, my opinion of Ryan Gatti has changed drastically in the last few years. And I went from one of the people who, listened to everybody else and what they said rather than actually what he did. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't disagree. And sometimes we'll have a phone call or something and we'll argue things out. But, and I'm certainly not carrying water for Gatti or anything like that, but I will say my opinion of him has changed 180 degrees. And so I would encourage anybody, whether you agree with his votes, and what he did in politics or not, at least take a look at all sides of Ryan Gatti. And, we're talking about him like he's some superhero or whatever, but before you just pass judgment, don't pass judgment just based on what Moon Griffon has said or what Mike Johnson has said.
I agree with that. I do. I mean, I don't know that my opinion of Ryan, I think I've had the same opinion of Ryan always. I mean, I've known who he was. He's known who I am. We have always had dialogue on issues. We have disagreed on issues. We've argued. And But the one thing that I do appreciate most about my relationship with Ryan, even when we have disagreed and when we've got into some humdingers, I'm talking about where we just we couldn't talk to each other, either one anymore. In fact, I can recall me telling him, "Look, I don't want to talk to you anymore. I just shut up. I don't want to hear it." But we always are able to have that next conversation and discussion. It's not ever been friendship ending per se, even though we disagree. So that I do appreciate, and I will say that, there's been issues that he's changed his mind after we've talked, and he's took a different position. He, he's opened my mind on a couple of things. He has. And appreciate that.
Yeah, well, and surprise to everybody, you and I don't agree on everything. As a matter of fact, we have some very interesting discussions. But in the end, we appreciate each person's viewpoint. Sometimes you may change my mind, and sometimes I may change yours. So it all works out.
But if we could just get rid of government,
go to complete anarchy, it'd be great.
I mean, but government is all of our problems. That's all.
I've said, look, I have a pickup truck and I have a bass boat, and to get to the lake safely.
Do you have your government sticker on your bass boat?
Oh, yes, I do. And even better, but look, government has a function. To get safely to the lake and not tear up my equipment, it requires a paved road. And unfortunately, all the roads are government roads, just about.
Do you have your government permit to launch at those boat launches that?
Don't make me answer that question. I do not stick that ugly sticker on my trailer, my boat.
Are you wearing your government required life vest as you're motoring around, or do you have enough life vests in your boat? Do you have a charged fire extinguisher?
Yes, I do. But
do you have all the government required numbers on the side of your boat? I'm just wondering. I'm just trying to make sure that you're.
Oh yeah. Oh, I'm doing the Mother May all you want, but let me say this: I wear the life jackets most or sometimes, but I have the required life jackets not because the government tells me, but because I know what happens if you get in the water without one and get knocked out. The boat runs over you. There's 1,000 things that can happen. I carry a fire extinguisher in the boat, not because the government tells me to, because I know exactly what happens from firsthand experience when that fiberglass and, well, actually the resin catches on fire. And the fire extinguisher is not going to help you much, but it'll give you time to at least, get out of the way, hopefully.
That's all good and dandy, and I appreciate and respect that, but government has progressed so far to the point that now government believes it's its right and duty to shut any criticism from any of us up, not even just nationally, but in Bossier City as well, too. I mean, government creep is everywhere, and I'm sorry, it's going to take all of us stepping up in one way or another to shut it down.
It is. Now, to kind of start ending on a positive note, I'll say this. I've been very pleased at the response so far with the Bossier term limits help and the people signing up also to support the term limits for the police jury once we turn our attention with the coalition to that. So from that perspective, I've seen some improvement. People are waking up. They're discovering social media and, our videos and other people's podcasts and videos. Those guys down there on the sidewalk and that Weston Marriott guy that, continues to smart off to the city council. People are paying attention.
Yeah, and the thing is and Ryan said it in his own words, but the public is at a disadvantage with the politicians and the way that they portray things to them and use government against them. And just like we said earlier at the beginning of this show, there is a pattern. And looking forward to our next show, I'm very confident that by next show, Rex, we're probably going to be able to expose a pattern of behavior of politicians to the public that's probably going to shock and awe you.
Yes, we have some interesting stuff coming up. The math don't lie, and It's numbers. It's, like you said, a pattern, a sequence of things. And I would say it will be very interesting. I want to address Val's comment. Have you asked Dodie to come on your show? I've asked Dodie several times myself personally, and because of scheduling, she's not been able to come on. She was, to remind everybody, she was scheduled and confirmed to come on with Chris Turner and debate Chris Turner, but her schedule changed and she wasn't able to do that, which is why we had Chris Turner on by himself last week. So I wanted to make sure and address that again.
Well, that's all I have to elaborate on tonight, or I guess go into. I got nothing else.
Hey, I'm pretty much out of stuff to talk about for now. Quick wrap up. Remember, if you have stuff you want to send to us, but you want to stay pretty darned anonymous, go make a free protonmail.com account. Don't put any identifying information. Oh, you messed up my spell.
You said pretty darn.
Pretty darn. Well, if you want to be really anonymous, when you sign into it, do it from a VPN. I mean, there's all sorts of things that you can do, Proton Mail does not keep logs.
Okay.
But your ISP does. So your ISP, your internet provider, is going to know that you went to Proton Mail. So if you want to be really, really careful, then start doing things like make a Proton Mail account. Again, like we say, no identifying information. Start doing things like learning to use a VPN and bounce in from another country and make yourself harder to track that way. Proton Mail does not give up your information. They literally can't. It's encrypted. Proton Mail can't see your stuff at all, but there are ways, let's be truthful about it, there are ways to potentially track you down if you leave a breadcrumb trail. Not the content of the email, but potentially track you if you leave a breadcrumb trail. So, for instance, people like, the journalists abroad where they actually cut people's heads off for this sort of thing if they share the wrong information. They need to be much more cautious than you and I do. So, anyway, send an email to bossierwatch Proton Mail. We do check that. If you have a regular email, you're not worried about, who sees it or whatever, bossierwatch@gmail.com. We do read those. If you want to donate us some coffee money, bossierwatch.org or .com. It doesn't matter. Blah, blah, blah. I think I've said my spill.
That's all I got. Have a good night. Appreciate everybody watching. Thank you so much.
Appreciate y'all watching, folks. Yeah, thanks a lot. No talk about pigs on a bus. Not tonight, Jack. Maybe we'll get to that next week. All right. We'll see y'all later. No pigs on the bus tonight.